IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Vince D'Addario. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Bryan Driscoll, and we are back and ready to dive into some more Notre Dame content. Today's going to be fun, guys, because today is going to kick off our position previews, which we're going to be doing over the next 5 weeks. A lot going on around Notre Dame Nation. If you're wondering, hey, are you guys going to talk about the big visit weekend this weekend? Nope, we are not. That is something that we covered on the premium message board. We will get into, obviously, some different breakdowns of different players as we do different shows, but I put a very detailed breakdown of the recruiting visits up on Sunday, and then I've been updating it ever since. Notre Dame knocked it out of the park. But that is going to be something that is for our premium members only as far as all the specifics of the intel that I got. And Trev and Vince, you both saw it. It is a lot. The Irish did a great job this weekend. But today on this show, we're kicking off our position preview. And, of course, guys, we got to start at quarterback. And so we're going to talk about the quarterback position today. And we've got a format that we like. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. We'll kind of tailor each one to the specific realities of each position. And I think quarterback deserves to go first this year. I mean, first of all, quarterback should always go first. But it's even more of a big deal this year because it's one of the biggest storylines, if not the biggest storyline going into the season. I would argue, guys, that it's the biggest unknown going into the season as far from a certainty standpoint. We'll have our opinions about what's going to happen, but as far as what we know, this is a big question mark. And so we're going to have plenty of time to talk about that. And then also we're going to continue our series on breaking down the Notre Dame opponents. And we are going in order, as you guys, I would assume, have learned already based on how we went the first 2 weeks. We went Miami in week 1, and then we went into last weekend Texas A&M. Next week we'll get into Arkansas, then Boise, so forth and so on. So it kind of times out well, guys, because I'm just going to be honest. I don't know that our Purdue breakdown is going to be as thorough and in depth as the last one. So this is a good position breakdown to get into. And if you want to leave some questions, leave some questions. I don't know where our time is going to be at the end of the day, but if we get through this maybe a little quicker than we thought, and we're feeling a little, like we want to answer some questions, we'll answer some questions. Obviously, if you throw a super chat in there, we'll definitely bring that up during the show. But guys, I've been waiting all year for this. I had to force myself to wait to start the position previews until now because you do it too early, then you get to July and you're like, well, I don't know what to talk about anymore. And, the last 3 weeks before fall camp, you're just like, all right, guys, let's just do mailbags every day because we've used up all of our ammunition here already. But, man, I've been chomping at the bit to get to these because, A, I'm excited about this football team, and then, B, Vince, this quarterback position, it's got such a different dynamic to it this offseason because, as we've said before, this is the first true quarterback battle, I would argue, at Notre Dame since, if we're being honest about it, it's the first true quarterback battle we've had since, you could say spring of 23. I think that's nonsense. I think Tyler Buchner would have had to just play out of his mind.
I think 2018.
You got to go back to 2018 with Brandon Wimbush and Ian Book. It really is, Vince. And then also it's an era that we've been waiting for since these two kids committed to Notre Dame within, it was within, I think, 4 months of each other, 4 or 5 months of each other. CJ committed in the summer of 2022. Kenny committed, it'd be 2022. Yeah. And then Kenny committed in November, I believe, of that year. So the quarterback future kind of signed or committed very quickly. And now's our first chance to truly find out what these kids are all about. And that's and it's going to be so important to the season, Vince. So that's why I'm excited about this and why it was really a no-brainer to start things off with the quarterback position.
Well, and you talk about the competition, and I want to make it very clear. It is a competition. Like it's not fodder for Marcus Freeman and all of his offseason interviews that he's doing, with Joe or with Clad and with, everybody. And it's not fodder for those conversations. It's a legitimate quarterback competition. Now, one guy may have a lead going into the fall over another guy, but nobody's out of this race. And we don't know when they're going to call it. We don't know when he's going to say, okay, this is our starting quarterback. We all think we know when a good time to do it would be. so that they have enough preparation time before the start of the season, things like that. But this is a true quarterback competition going into the summer and going into the fall. So we are not, carrying Notre Dame's PR water here to just say that there's a competition. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest, it's been like that in the past. There have been, it's a competition.
Oh, Jack Cohn may not start at quarterback, and
Right.
Sam Hartman may not start at quarterback, right. And Steve Angeli might unseat Riley Leonard. No,
exactly. No, exactly. Like this is not that. There are two extremely talented young guys that have the ability to start at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame will be successful with either one of these guys at quarterback. I mean, insanely talented. And so that's why we're having this conversation, because it is a legitimate battle. And these guys are both really talented guys. It's not a made-up competition. So I wanted to throw that out there, because it has been a long time, Bryan, since there's been a legitimate quarterback battle. So that's why we're talking about it the way we are.
Now, could there have been a time where if one guy didn't play very well, the other guy might have been able to win the job? Sure. I mean, you could argue 2022 with Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine was a quarterback battle. It wasn't. It was if Tyler gets hurt or plays really poorly, he won't start. It wasn't a real battle. This one is more so. And Trev, it's also different because this is the first time in a while that we really anticipate. You had the one blip in 2022, but it's the first time really in 4 years, or only the second time in 5 years, that we're going into a season with a quarterback that is homegrown. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Homegrown, and a guy that's only been coached by the current staff, because even Tyler Buchner in 2022, he went through a lot of different changes during his tenure. I mean, in 2021, he's got Brian Kelly as his head coach. 2022, he's got Marcus Freeman as his head coach. Obviously Kenny spent a year with Jared Parker, but he's only had one head coach and one quarterback coach, and he didn't play in 2022. So, and now you're also going to a thing, Trev, where both of these kids are going into year 2 of the offense. But I think it's an important year for Notre Dame to finally establish that, hey, we don't have to go to the portal to have success at quarterback, to get championship play at quarterback. I think that's incredibly important for the future of the program from a recruiting standpoint, a development standpoint, and just a continuity standpoint, because I just think it's hard to year after year after year have to go to the portal, and it gets expensive too, to have to go to the portal year after year, which is why they need to have the success at the position this year in order to feel good about, next time they get in this situation doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a needle mover for the program. You go back and you think 21, they bring in a transfer. 23, they bring in a transfer. Last season, they had a transfer, with obviously last season being the most successful season under a transfer. But you go and you sit down and you look, this is Notre Dame's 5th season in a row with a new starting quarterback. And then just to make matters even a little bit heavier to this situation, it's also the 5th season in a row they start the season away from home, away from South Bend. So when you tie in all of those, that's why this quarterback competition has so much implication to it. Going back to what Vince said, this is absolutely a true competition. If not, number 8 still wouldn't be in South Bend, folks. It's just the way it is. In 2023, it was a competition between Sam Hartman and Tyler Buchner. After the spring of 2023, Tyler Buchner was no longer in South Bend. And so you look at what this means for this team moving forward, regardless of who they go with. They are going with, a very high ceiling kid. They're going with somebody that is homegrown, and we're going to get a lot of questions answered about Gino Guidugli and his job of being able to develop quarterbacks. Because up to this point, it's kind of marked as an incomplete, like we referenced last week. We just don't know what a fully developed, not fully developed, but from the time they enter college to the time they enter the starting lineup, a developed quarterback from Gino Guidugli looks like. And so when you start factoring in all these at Notre Dame,
right? So
when you start factoring in all of these things, makes this conversation really interesting, fellas. Really interesting.
Bryan, I want to throw this at you because obviously, we've been following Notre Dame for a long time, professionally. Obviously, the three of us have been following it our whole lives. But why in this day and age in 2025 is it important that Notre Dame, after going to the portal successfully, why is it important that they have a homegrown guy? Why does that matter? If they're going to win games, they're winning the national championship with a guy from the portal. So why is it important that they have somebody that's homegrown?
I think Notre Dame should never be afraid to go to the portal if it makes them a significantly better football team. If there's uncertainty about the ability of the current room to lead the team to a championship, which is why the players that are in the battle now were on the roster last year, plus they had Steve Angeli, and Notre Dame went to the portal because they didn't feel these guys are developed enough, they're old enough. Do we really want to turn the keys over? And I don't know that there was enough faith in the town around them because of the lack of certainty. They knew they were going to have a young offensive line. They knew they were going to have a new look receiving core. And they knew they had a lot of key players on defense to replace that. Hey, I don't know that now is the time. And there was a guy like Riley Leonard in the portal who was the kind of impact player you want. I don't know that guy for Notre Dame was there this year, but like I said, that wasn't really an option for them anyway. They were ready to go to it. But I think it's important for a lot of ways, Vince. And number one is in this era of rev share and the way that the system is going, it's going to get more and more and more expensive every year to land a portal quarterback who you're investing a lot of money into. Plus, you're going to have the money you've already spent on landing top quarterbacks, which is just going to cost you now. And then now you've got to break up that $13 to $15 million with the rest of your roster when you've just invested. I mean, in some cases, you might have to invest a third of that, if not more, in one player out of the portal. I think that's a big reason. It's finances. Another reason is continuity. It was great that Riley Leonard did what he did last year, and the team that they got beat by in the championship game also had a portal quarterback at Ohio State. And Ohio State showed last year, like, look, that's a team that for the most part has been homegrown. And even the transfer guys they've had are guys that transferred after their freshman year and then were developed at Ohio State. Like if you go back and think about Justin Fields in 19 and 20, yeah, he was a transfer, but his development almost all came at Ohio State. There wasn't a lot of one-year wonders. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was a high school recruit. JT Barrett was a high school recruit. CJ Stroud was a high school recruit. Cardell Jones was a high school recruit. And then they're going to turn their keys over this year to another transfer, but it's a different kind of transfer in Julian Sayin, who spent one spring at Alabama before transferring to Ohio State because Nick Saban retired. And did he even go? He transferred from Bama, right? Didn't he spend the spring at Bama? I believe he did. But it's still a guy that you've developed and that's going to start for you for 2-3 years. I think that's important. I think having a face of your program at a place like Notre Dame is very important. Think about, guys, the impact on recruiting that'd be happening in the program right now if when all these kids came to visit Notre Dame, they were getting to meet Riley Leonard, who's returning in 2025 as a second-year starter. You know, when you're recruiting 26 and 27 receivers, you don't have to say, who's your quarterback going to be? Well, no, let's see who's in the portal next year. It's this guy, or it's one of these two guys, and you get to watch them throw at practice. And then once the starter wins the job, then that's your guy. So I just think for Notre Dame specifically, it's ideal to have a homegrown quarterback. It's not a must. It's not you can't win without it. I mean, Jack Cohn's team was pretty good in 2021. It should have been better if you had better coaching, but I thought that was a good situation. Sam Hartman, like, look, people can complain all they want about Sam Hartman and he wasn't as good as he was at Wake and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But could you imagine what their record would have been in year two if they didn't have Sam Hartman at quarterback? You know, so you look at those things, and the transfer portal has worked for Notre Dame for the most part. But to truly take that next step, in my opinion, you want a homegrown guy. And then the final piece, Vince, is you don't really know what's going to be in the portal at quarterback from year to year. And I have a feeling that fewer and fewer high-level starting quarterbacks are going to be entering the portal moving forward. That's just my guess. That's my gut. Because of the way that these new deals are going to be allowed to be structured, you're going to be signing Jay Billis. The argument he made is that what you're going to see is that a lot of these deals are going to be tenured contracts. It's going to be, hey, you're signing here for 3 years, and if you don't sign, if you leave, then you've got to pay back X amount of dollars, which is going to mean, backups may transfer, but like you're not going to see as many Riley Leonards or Will Howards perhaps jumping in the portal for the reasons that they did. So I could be wrong on that, but that's something that I believe is something we've got to consider if you're a Notre Dame coaching staff. And being able to, and then the final piece, guys, is I do believe from Notre Dame wants to be a high school driven recruiting program. Best leader of recruiting classes in most years are high school quarterbacks. And you get to the point where you start struggling to develop your own quarterbacks, then it's going to get harder and harder and harder to get the next CJ Carr, to get the next Kenny Minchey, to get the next Noah Grubbs type of player. It just is going to get harder and harder to do that. And so those are the reasons why I think it's very important that you can show you can have success with a high school quarterback. Doesn't mean you can't ever go to the portal again. And it just means this is ideally the beginning of where that's just an anomaly type of season as opposed to a pattern, which it had been for Notre Dame for the last 4 years.
Yeah, Bryan, I couldn't agree more. You go back and you listen to what Marcus Freeman talks about their philosophy around the transfer portal. You want to supplement your roster. You don't want to be built through the transfer portal. I think the terminology he uses, they want to major in high school recruiting and minor in the transfer portal. Starting quarterback at Notre Dame is a pretty high-octane position and something that I'm sure they don't want to continue to supplement through the portal, to your point. And so that's what makes this competition so big. They had to wait for the recruiting and the development to catch up to where they were at now. And so that's why, to Vince's question, they had to go to the portal a little bit, because last season, as much as we loved him, Steve Angeli wasn't going to do to Georgia what Riley Leonard was able to do to Georgia. A redshirt freshman Kenny Minchey wasn't going to be able to, and a true freshman CJ Carr wasn't going to be able to. That was the state of the roster then. But there's a reason why they didn't go to the transfer portal this offseason to bring in a quarterback, even after a veteran like Steve Angeli left. Now they're ready to roll with these two guys, which is a good transition into really the breakdown of this overall competition.
And one thing I'll say, Trev, is I think it's smarter money. Because it's not like if whoever wins the starting job this year goes out there and he's really good and then he's really good again next year, those guys are going to cost you money as well. But it's like with anything else, I'd rather spend my money on guys that are here. And my team is going to be a lot less fractured if the guy they know that they know the work he's put in, they know the leadership he's established, they know the character of that guy is getting that big deal, as opposed to some dude they've never met before. And then you're hoping that those guys are all like what Riley Leonard was character-wise. I mean, Jack Cohn was well-liked by his teammates. Sam was to a degree. Riley was beloved by his teammates. But, again, you can't always know that kind of guy is going to be out there and also have the talent to go win for you.
So you make a good point when you bring up the money, and I think this is going to be something interesting. I know I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I think it's going to be interesting to see, and they're not going to publish these things, and it's not going to be maybe readily available. But if you've already got a kid on your roster, let's say Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr, right, and they become the starter at Notre Dame, and obviously their value would go up at that point. What are they being paid versus somebody that you would have to go out into the portal, into quote unquote free agency to get? Are they going to get a kind of, not a hometown discount, but like you're already on the roster, you're here for a reason.
It's an unproven discount. That's what it is. I mean,
right.
You're going to still be paying to get a high school kid that's pretty good, but it's not going to be the number it is when you're trying to go get a portal guy.
Yeah.
And so that guy eventually is going to make the money a portal guy would, but it's like with anything else. It's like you draft. It's like this. You think about this. You draft a quarterback in the first round. You're going to have to pay him a pretty penny, but it doesn't compare. Like this talking NFL, it still doesn't compare when he's on his rookie contract, what everybody else is paying a quarterback on his second, third, fourth contract, where they're making $30, $40, $50 million a year. I mean, Daniel Jones got paid $50 million a year. Brock Purdy just made a $50 million contract. You just got a $50 million a year contract. And I'm old enough to remember when John Elway, I think, was the first quarterback to be paid $1 million a year. And now that's like chump change for like a high school, top 5-star high school kid, But the point being, it's eventually going to get there. But as the increment gets there, like CJ Carr is not going to make as much money this year, most likely, from what I understand, as what your top portal guy would have got paid. I mean, Duke's paying a kid they got from Tulane like $3 million a year. And he's a good player, but that's because you're now in a bidding war for those guys. And you are in high school, but then it's like, okay, now you got to go prove yourself. And so that's kind of where it's at. That's why that factors into me. So I mean, you're still paying that position, still going to make money, but it's not going to be like it is in that 1 year where you've got to put these big packages together to compete to even get a kid there. It's that's just a much tougher situation. And then now you've got to do that every single year with those type of players. And it can be challenging. And then it can also create more opportunities for friction within your team, where you pay this guy, we don't know, like $5 million to come here. Like, what has that guy done? That can get you into some really tough situations from a team building standpoint. And so I think that factors into it as well. Guys will have much less of a problem when one of their boys is getting paid, because they understand, like, yeah, of course that guy's getting paid. Did you see him throwing last year? Did you see what that type of thing?
We are going to move on to some evaluations, but before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah, I want to talk. There's a couple things I want to talk about that are
yeah.
part of this quarterback preview. The history of the first-year guys, which I think factors into this conversation. And then I do think there's a part of, before we get into the specific players, of there's a unique burden on the shoulders of whoever this quarterback is going to be. But I wanted to respond to something, because one thing we get a lot, Trev, in the chat when we're talking about quarterbacks is a comments about, well, should it, and I've got this on the message board. Should we expect Notre Dame, or is it asking too much of Notre Dame to be able to play for a title, win a title with a freshman quarterback, referring to CJ, or a first-year starter, to people who are more open to the idea of either or? Well, number one, I want to continue to point out, CJ Carr is a redshirt freshman, not a freshman. That's not a semantic difference. That is a legitimate difference, because this is going to be CJ Carr's 4th semester on campus, where a true freshman is going into his 2nd semester on campus. That matters. CJ Carr's been a part of bowl prep for 2 different seasons and at Notre Dame. Kenny has as well. And so it is different. But I also think, guys, one thing that I put together is, when you look at the bowl era, last year, I believe, was the first year that a Final Four team did not have a first-year starting quarterback. Now, not first-year starting quarterback at their school, but a guy who was starting as the starter for the first time. And because you obviously, Will Howard started for a couple seasons at Kansas State. Riley Leonard started for 2 years at Duke. You had Drew Aller was in his 2nd year at Penn State. And then, of course, Quinn Ewers is in his 3rd or 4th year starting at Texas. So 3rd year starting at Texas. So you look at 2023, Jalen Milroe was a first-year starter. In 2022, J.J. McCarthy was a first-year starter and a 2nd-year player. So Jalen Milroe in 2023 was in the same grade that Kenny Minchey is now. And in 2022, J.J. McCarthy was in the same grade that C.J. Carr is in now. Now, J.J. played more as a freshman than C.J. obviously did, but it's not a significant amount to where it's like, okay, it's apples to oranges. So I don't think it matters as much. I don't think getting some mop-up minutes at the end of games necessarily impacts you the way that it did. J.J. McCarthy was not asked to lead the team to a championship. He was asked to just, dude, you're along for the ride. Make some plays. Don't screw it up. 2021, you had 2 different first-year starters at quarterback. You had a redshirt freshman in Bryce Young at Alabama, and you had Cade McNamara. So for 2 years in a row, Michigan had a different first-year quarterback starting, because Cade McNamara that year. 2020, there was no first-year starter in 2020. You had Justin Fields, you had Trevor Lawrence, you had Mac Jones. Mac Jones was technically a first-year starter in that it was the first year he was the guy, but he had started multiple games the year before in place of Tua Tagovailoa, who was injured, and he threw for over 1,000 yards. That's a much different situation than what Kenny and CJ are walking into. 2019, Justin Fields is his first year as a starter. He was a redshirt freshman, or he was a sophomore. 2018, Ian Book. You had 2, Ian Book and Trevor Lawrence were first-year starters. Ian Book was a redshirt sophomore, same grade as Kenny. Trevor Lawrence was a true freshman. 2017, Georgia had a first-year starting quarterback and a true freshman in Jake Fromm, who took over in game 2. 2016, you had a true freshman starting in the championship game. So 3 years in a row, in 16, 17, and 18, you had a true freshman starting in the national championship game. And let's see, one of those guys won it. The other two lost. 2015, Jacob Coker was a first-year starter at Alabama. He was a senior. In 2014, JT Barrett was basically a second-year player, redshirt freshman at Ohio State. Now, he did not play in the postseason because of the injury he suffered against Michigan, but he was the quarterback that got them to that point. He got hurt against Michigan, and then Cardell Jones took it over from there. So that situation had already been established. And then also in 2014, Blake Sims was a first-year starter at Alabama. Also want to point out that Jake Browning was a true sophomore in 2016 when he led Washington to the championship or to the semifinals. But he started the year before, but saw a huge jump, true sophomore. And then, of course, in 2015, Deshaun Watson was also a true sophomore, but he had started games the year before and played a decent amount the year before. Looking at the 5 years before the playoff started, in 2013, Florida State versus Auburn, 2 first-year starting quarterbacks, Jameis Winston being a redshirt freshman. Keep in mind that in 2013, there was not the same redshirt rule, so that meant Jameis Winston did not play at all in 2012. 2012, Notre Dame started a redshirt freshman who did not play a snap the year before, Never Golson. 2011, A.J. McCarron was a first-year starter at Alabama. In 2010, Cam Newton and Darren Thomas were first-year starters in college. Cam Newton had obviously started at JUCO. Nick Marshall in 2013 also started at a JUCO, which is a very different animal than D1. And then 2019, Greg McElroy was a first-year starter as well at Alabama. So I just think those things need to be pointed out that, guys, first-year starters and young first-year starters is not a rare thing in college football. What it requires is one of two things. Number one, most of those kids played on a very good team, where even Trevor Lawrence in 2018, where he was not asked to be 2020 version of Trevor Lawrence. He could just kind of, make some plays when you need him to. And, same thing with like 2016, Jalen Hurts. And most of those guys were very talented. But even there, you have a Jake Fromm, who's not in the same league as a Jalen Hurts or a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields or even a J.J. McCarthy. So we've seen all types of different quarterbacks step up. Some of them are athletic guys. Some of them are drop back guys. There's no constant pattern to the success of those players other than this. They were part of really, really good teams, and they didn't have to put those teams on their shoulders and lead them to victory. And that's why I do have much more confidence, Trev, in these young quarterbacks being successful, because they don't need them to carry this team the way that Riley Leonard had to carry that team for Notre Dame last year.
100%. That is the thing that they all have in common. The supporting cast on either side of the ball were outstanding for all of those first-time starters that you listed. The other thing that they had in common, there are moments in all of those seasons for all the quarterbacks that you listed off that at some point, and this is going back to the expectations of this group conversation, there were moments, not throughout the duration of the season, like what Riley Leonard had to do, but there were moments where it's like, hey, we need you to go make a play here. Hey, we need you to go push the ball into the end zone on this particular drive, in this moment, in this quarter. And that's consistent throughout all of these quarterbacks. I go back and think of Everett Golson in 2012 against Pitt. Hey, second half against Pitt, you're going to have to play at another level to get us back into this game. I think about the Georgia-Oklahoma game in the Rose Bowl in that playoff. Nick Chubb and Sony Michel were kind of dominating, but Oklahoma, they got a couple key turnovers. Kirby Smart looked to Jake Fromm, was like, hey, we need you on this drive. We need you to go punch it in, throws a touchdown pass to Javon Wims. And so there's a lot of different things here that are in common, but it's something that I feel confident with these two kids that it is 100% in their realm of capability to just kind of be a distributing point guard, but at moments, drive the lane, make a play, do what you got to do.
To your point, in that semifinal game against Georgia, which is still one of the best playoff games we ever had, Jake Fromm went 20 of 29 for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. The running game, 34 carries for 317 yards. I mean, but Vince, you and I saw with our own eyes, because we were both in the Notre Dame Stadium that day, in Jake Fromm's first career start, where he made some absolutely money throws down the stretch. of that game, win that game.
I like Jake Fromm. I actually
he
like
just
him
doesn't have the elite talent.
Yeah, right.
That
he needs to have talent around him, and he could be really good.
He's not a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields, a guy like that. But that kid had guts, and he had he still got drafted, so it's not like he was some bum that just turned around and handed the ball off all day. He had talent. He just didn't have elite talent. And so that's why I say I just don't worry about that as much, because good teams consistently get led by young quarterbacks, including Notre Dame, who played for the national championship in 2012 with a redshirt freshman quarterback who played fewer snaps than what CJ Carr played last year during his freshman year.
Right.
But that's the same story, Vince. Notre Dame didn't, and Brian Kelly said it all the time, they didn't ask Everett Golson to drive the bus. And I think CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey are both more prepared from the mental standpoint to run the show than Everett was. Now, can they be the playmakers Everett was? That's a different conversation. But it's just ironic that when you look at it, Notre Dame's played for the championship, gotten at least to the semifinals 4 times since 2010. And in 3 of those years, they were led by a first-time starter. 2 of those times, it was a guy that hadn't started anywhere else. Ian Book had 1 career start, and it was the year before at North Carolina, and he wasn't very good in that game. So that's one of those things, guys, where if the guy's good, this is the only concern. If the guy's not good enough, then it's a problem. But if he's good enough, this team is good enough where you're not asking that player to go carry the team the way that Everett Golson had to do, the way that Riley Leonard had to do last year, the way that Cam Newton did for Auburn in 2010. CJ Carr's not leading that team to a championship in 2010. Cam was an anomaly and a guy that had played a lot of JUCO football. I'm not saying CJ has to go be Jameis Winston. I'm not saying, but he is good enough as a redshirt freshman to be that kind of player. And then Kenny Minchey's a redshirt sophomore who's had 2 different seasons where he's got on the field and thrown passes. So I'm just not as concerned about it, because I have evidence to tell me that if the team is good enough, they don't need that guy to play to his full potential. They just need him to play to his potential that season of like where he is. They don't need Kenny Minchey to play like 5th-year senior version of Kenny Minchey, or CJ Carr to play like senior year version of. They just need him to be the best versions of themselves at where they are in their development. So I just think it's smart to point out that, because that is it's a valid question, guys. It is a very valid question to ask. Is it fair to expect a young quarterback to lead this team to a championship? And the answer is, with the talent he'll inherit, yeah, it's reasonable. It's reasonable to say that this team can make a run and that the quarterback won't be this giant stumbling block, because honestly, at the end of the day, Vince, they have 2 very talented quarterbacks that are battling for this job. I mean, they have more than just 2, but they have 2 that are battling for this job. And, that's a big piece to this.
So before we get into the specific breakdown, because I did want to bring up this point as well, and I'll throw it to Trevor to kick it off. We've established Notre Dame's going to have a first-year starting quarterback. That is absolutely going to happen regardless of what happens with this competition. Should Notre Dame fans temper their expectations for the 25 season because of the quarterback? What are the expectations for this team, knowing that there's going to be a first-year starting quarterback?
I don't think expectations should be tempered down at all, because the makeup of the roster is such that when I look at what the expectations are for Notre Dame, it's you make the playoffs, you make a run. That's the expectation with the makeup of this roster. Quarterback plays a big part in it, but last season, those were the same expectations, and we were talking about that, albeit he started a couple years at Duke, but with somebody that we had not seen out of the spring take a snap in a Notre Dame football uniform yet. More experience, obviously, but he's injured. You don't know how chemistry is going to work out here. He had receivers and younger quarterbacks teaching him the offense, and the expectation was you still make the first 12-team playoffs, and then given what the rest of the landscape looks like, you go on a run. With the talent surrounding them, I absolutely think the expectation should remain the same. Now, to other people, maybe their expectations are different. Maybe I've seen some of it, which I heavily disagree with. There's a lot of people out there that say it's championship or bust. If that's your expectation, maybe you tamper it down. But that would be my advice, whether you're a Notre Dame fan, whether you're an Ohio State fan. I don't like that outlook on seasons for teams. But for Notre Dame specifically, no. It's a younger, inexperienced quarterback with an extremely high ceiling with a lot of talent around him, who's now going into his second year of an offense. That's another thing that Notre Dame offenses haven't been able to say is continuity at the coordinator position. And so all those are going to be big.
Vince, I want to hear your opinion on this. To me, the only thing that should be tamped down is making sure that the expectations for whoever the starter is realistic. And not thinking like, okay, the starter's going to go out there, be elite, be a Heisman Trophy finalist, throw for X amount of yards, X amount of touchdowns,
right,
and be an All-American. And no, that's the only thing I'm tamping down is let's not get too carried away. Like, okay, is CJ going to throw for 4,000 yards or 4,500 yards? Is Kenny going to throw for 3,500 yards and rush for 1,000, or is he going to rush for 4,000 yards or pass for 4,000 yards and rush for 1,000? Like that type of stuff needs to be tamped down because again, I don't think they're going to be asking the team to ask them to carry that. But that's the only thing to me, Vince, that I think needs to be tamped down. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this since you asked the question. But like, I just think it's, hey, let's tamp down some of the crazy expectations for the starting quarterback and understand that he's going to be a cog in the machine this year. Yeah. The driver of the machine is still Jeremiah Love. It's still the offensive line. It's still Jadarian Price. It's still going to be Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse. And he is expected to simply be like, he's the conductor. But like the conductor is only as good as, the train that he's riding on. If there's issues with the train, there's nothing the conductor do about it. Like, it's like, I'm not that guy. I'm just steering this thing and getting people where they need to go. Those are the only expectations I have tamped down. But that's why the expectations for the team with a young quarterback should be more determined by what's around that young quarterback than necessarily that young quarterback.
I think that Notre Dame is in a very unique position, at least in my lifetime of watching Notre Dame football, where they've got great options at quarterback, and I don't think those options should hinder the expectations for this team. Now, I do think that September for Notre Dame, the schedule, it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough. Those first two games are tough, right? Going on the road to Miami, Texas A&M coming into town, like it's tough, and so you hope, and I think Notre Dame has the depth and the talent to absorb those first couple of starts for the first-year quarterback, right? I don't think that'll be a problem. And I don't think, personally, my expectations of the position as Notre Dame gets into the second half of the season, where you see the conductor having a little bit more control over which way the train is going. To use your analogy there, I think that it's okay for whoever it is to be a passenger on the train at first, still making decisions and doing all the things that you need to do as a quarterback. But then as the season starts to progress, now you're going to start seeing a little bit more of the quarterback's personality on the offense. And by the time you get to the playoff, which is where we all think Notre Dame belongs, regardless of who the quarterback is this year, whether it's Kenny Minchey, whether it's CJ Carr. Once they get to the playoff, and I know it's a cliche, but you're not a freshman anymore. Like you are now the leader of this offense, and you need to start making it run. Like that's where I'm at with my expectations, and I don't think that Notre Dame fans should feel much different. I mean, you are not going to be at a disadvantage because of who the quarterback is at Notre Dame. I think that's my overall overarching opinion about this. You're not going to be at a disadvantage. You do need to lean on the rest of the offensive weapons. And I do believe there are weapons there at wide receiver, at running back, obviously, at offensive line, and at coordinator. That's a big one. Okay. That's a big one. I just think they're not going to be at a disadvantage. And I think eventually that quarterback is going to grow into his own cleats and really lead the offense. Like that's where I'm at with expectations for this team. And I don't have a dog in the fight as far as who the quarterback is, because either one, I think the ceiling is high and they're going to be able to take this team where it needs to go. That is where we are going to transition over to some specific talk about each guy that is in this race. But before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. As you heard Bryan talk about before, we are not going to get into the recruiting weekend that just happened. A lot of stuff happened. That's over on the message boards. And so you want to go over the premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com, get yourself a membership, and then you'll be in the know like the rest of us, because I read it this morning and now I'm in the know. And so I think all of you should do the same thing. So if you want that, you need to get over to boards.irishbreakdown.com. And then, of course, there's all kinds of written content over at irishbreakdown.com as well. So in the meantime, make sure you give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all of those fun things. And we'd really appreciate it. It really helps us make things go around here. All right, gentlemen, let's jump into some specific talk about the two guys that are in this race. The depth chart as it is, obviously they are going to have, 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster plus a walk-on. But the two guys at the top, they are going to be battling this out in Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr. Obviously, young group, not a lot of experience from a snaps standpoint, but both guys in this race have experience on this team. Yeah. As you mentioned before, CJ Carr is going to be in his 4th semester. Kenny Minchey is going to be in his 6th semester here at Notre Dame. So what you're lacking on maybe on field, you're not lacking in off the field part of the program.
And it goes even deeper than just the two in the battle. I mean, when you look at the overview of the position, it's obviously Kenny and CJ. We're going to talk a lot about them, but I think this is a great place to just mention Blake Horvath. I'm Blake Horvath. Blake Hebert.
I was like, okay.
Wait. Is there some breaking news we haven't talked about?
Like, okay.
Blake Hebert, because, he's, Blake Horvath, it's the running ability, but, we saw Vince, you and I were joking at one of the practices. We were like, if somebody came here, an NFL scout came here, and didn't know who any of the quarterbacks were, or at least only knew about them on paper, knew of their reputations, didn't know what numbers they were. And you said, okay, who's this? Because Notre Dame had a senior, a junior, a sophomore, and a freshman in the spring, because when Steve Angeli was still there. And if you just said, who's the freshman, who's the senior, you would have not guessed anyone other than Blake Hebert was the senior.
Because he looks standpoint,
He's got, he's like, this is him after a day of not shaving. He's 6'2 plus. He's 220 pounds. He's thick. He's put together. He's got an absolute hose for an arm. He's athletic. He's strong. Like, the physical tools for Blake Hebert are outstanding. He's just incredibly raw at this point in time, and he's young. So that's why he's not in the battle right now. But he is a guy that, if there's an injury to one of those two guys, he will be thrust into that number 2 role. So it is important to mention him. So that's why you just recruit talented players every year. Well, why did it really matter that you went out and got a talented quarterback when you've got CJ, Kenny, and Steve in there? Exactly this reason right here. One guy leaves, and then let's say whoever loses the battle this year leaves after the season. Now, all of a sudden, Blake Hebert's in a very important role for Notre Dame, and he's now say, okay, well, now I'm the heir apparent, but I'm the guy that's got to be ready right now to step up in case this guy goes down. That could be this year. Vince, you and I in past shows talked about how frequently it was for Notre Dame that they had quarterbacks miss time. They had quarterback miss time in 2010. They had a quarterback miss time in 2011. And I mean miss time, like missed starts or the majority of a game, or at least had multiple quarterbacks start. They had 2 quarterbacks start in 2011, 2011, 2012. 2013, I believe Tommy restarted every game, but to remember, he got knocked out real early in the USC game that year. 2014, you had 2 different quarterbacks start when you consider that Malik came in for the bowl game. 2015, you had 2 quarterbacks start. 2016, you had 1 quarterback start. But he got knocked out of the Stanford game for a little bit. 2017, you had Brandon Wimbush missed the North Carolina game with an injury. You need Ian Book to start. You had 2 different guys start in 2018. And then the guy that started the year had to come back into the starting lineup in November on senior day because Ian Book got hurt against Northwestern the previous week. So, I could go on. Ian Book in 19 and 20 stayed relatively healthy. Jack Cohn battled injuries in 2021. Remember, he got knocked out of the Wisconsin game. That's why Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner came into that game. And then, Jack was struggling against Virginia Tech. Tyler came in, and then boom, Tyler gets hurt, and then Jack's got to go back in. Like, Tyler gets hurt in 2022, and you need to start 2 different quarterbacks. 2023, Sam was able to start every game, and Riley's able to start every game, which was a blessing. But there was a while there we weren't sure if Riley Leonard was going to be able to start and continue to play when he got hurt against
Penn
Northern Illinois.
State.
So,
And Penn State.
that's right. And he also got hurt against Penn State. That's a pretty big deal. So, that would be Blake Hebert stepping into a similar situation this year if there's an injury somewhere else and then the starter goes down. So it's really smart to have depth. And if that happens again this year at Notre Dame, then all of a sudden Blake Hebert's right there with that opportunity along with Anthony Rizak, who's a pretty talented walk-on. And I do expect Tyler Buchner to end up back at quarterback. I do. That's just my expectation. That gives you more depth. That gives you a guy that has started games, has played. I mean, the guy that's got the most experience at quarterback by far is Tyler Buchner, who started 3 games and had a 300-plus yard, 5-touchdown performance in a bowl game over a top 25 SEC team in a game where the offense scored 45 points. That's your emergency quarterback. So let's be real about something. If the staff didn't have supreme confidence in the talent of the 2 veterans, or the 2 old, the 2 guys battling, number 1, they would have made sure Steve Angeli was happy enough to not leave. Number 2, they would have moved Tyler Buchner back to quarterback a long time ago and said, hey, this is a guy that's got, this guy, he served his punishment last year as a wide receiver. Let's move him back. But that's not, I think they're going to move him back as a exactly what I said, sort of an emergency quarterback situation. You have an injury, things happen, Tyler's there to kind of step in and say, hey, he can get us out of the ball game with his ability to run. That's all it is.
Yeah, and we were at enough practices where we all saw that Tyler Buchner was essentially the wide receiver's quarterback. I mean, he was throwing balls
playing lacrosse. He wasn't doing a whole lot of
football. You know what I mean? So like his arm's in shape. He can still, sling the ball and all those different things. It's just he was with the wide receivers all the time. You know what I mean? And so I would not be surprised at all, especially with the exit of Steve Angeli, to get another arm into that room. I mean, look, we all know that camp arm is a real thing and all of those different things. And so if you can have somebody else, throw in some of those drills and some of that, those other things, that's exactly what you're going to do. And so it would not surprise me in any way if Tyler Buchner was kind of almost, maybe not exclusively at quarterback, but like he's a camp arm. I don't know.
I think it'll ultimately be what they do.
Okay.
And that gives you a guy that can run the scout team in certain weeks. I mean, with all due respect to Anthony Rizak, I want Tyler Buchner running the scout team when they're getting ready to play Texas A&M.
Oh, yeah.
And Marcel Lee. I want him doing that when they're getting ready to play Navy and Marcel Reed. I want, you know what I mean? Like, Anthony Rizak may be more of the option when you're going to play NC State because he's 6'4 plus, he's lanky, he's kind of built a little bit like CJ Bailey. And then it also gives you more chances to have Anthony Hebert up with the quote unquote varsity. I think it's good for Blake to get some scout team reps early. You want him to play, but you want to have the ability to bring him up at certain times.
Yeah.
And I think just having Tyler Buchner helps with that. So it helps solidify the room. The camp arm aspect is important to that, Vince.
Yeah.
Very important to that. But it's also, there's a lot of reasons why. And then Tyler's a veteran who I think can provide leadership to the younger. Tyler's had to start at Ohio State.
Right.
He started in the Gator Bowl in South Carolina. He was a big-time recruit.
He started at Alabama.
He had all the pressure on him in 2022 that CJ Carr or Kenny will have on them this year.
Right.
That's a tremendous asset to have as long as everybody understands. We're not talking about Tyler Buchner becoming the starter or battling. We're talking about he is a great resource to have in that room.
Right.
And that alone is why I would say it might be good to, and he started at Alabama. Like this kid's played in some high leverage situations at Notre Dame. It would be smart to allow him in certain ways to share his experiences with these younger quarterbacks because he knows what it's like to be that big time recruit going into his second year of college where everyone's like, hey, they're going to be good this year because of him. And I think he can be a resource for that. So like when I think about the whole room, that's important to have before we really start getting into sort of, we'll break down the battle and then we'll get in each player. But like, it is important to talk about there's some uniqueness to the room as a whole.
Do you want to add anything, Trevor, to the room as a whole?
No, you guys hit most of the talking points. Only thing I was going to add, Riley Leonard even reached out to Tyler Buchner last season. to sit down and talk to him about, hey, what's it like battling adversity at a place like this? And we're talking about a kid and Riley Leonard who had significantly more starts.
Had beaten Clemson,
Yes. Right. And he took Tyler Buckner out to lunch after that Northern Illinois loss. And was like, hey, man, I need you to kind of help me get level-headed here. What is this place truly like? And so Tyler Buckner could actually 100% provide that type of support to a much younger cast this season entering the 2025 season.
Speaking of the cast that is entering the 25 season, let's kind of break this thing down, and we'll go in class order, top to bottom. So we'll start with Kenny Minchey and Trevor. I will throw it to you to start things off, and just give me a sense of who is Kenny Minchey, what does he bring to the offense, and what would the offense look like with number 8 behind center?
Yeah, Kenny Minchey, I would say amongst quarterback competitions across the country, may be the most misunderstood quarterback entering a quarterback competition. And here's what I mean by that. A lot of people maybe just view his skill set similar to Riley Leonard's. And so there's a lot of people who are on the outside looking in that assume if you plug in a kid like Kenny Minchey, it's going to be like Riley Leonard 2.0, but with like a little bit stronger of an arm. That's not the case. Kenny Minchey is absolutely, Bryan has said it so many times on this show, a pass-first quarterback. Don't confuse his athleticism to him just being a traditional dual threat guy. Will he see a few more design runs than what a CJ Carr would or what a Noah Grubbs would? I mean, yeah, but he's not going to have 187 carries like what Riley Leonard had last season. It's not that. We're talking about a kid with a really live arm. That was on showcase all throughout spring. That was in showcase in the blue gold game. I mean, he overthrew Will Pauling and Ben Minnick, 2 of the faster kids on the roster, from the opposite hash. I mean, we're talking about somebody who has a very, very live arm. And you go back and you look at his film from high school, the running aspect of his game wasn't really something he developed until he came into his athleticism when he arrived in South Bend. He's a very athletic kid, but he has a very, very live arm. So that's where I'm going to start with Kenny Minchey. I think he's misunderstood. I don't know what it is with him. I don't know if it's his background. I don't know if it's what people's expectations were maybe from last season. And now they think that the only way that Notre Dame can win is quarterback power on 3rd and 2. Then your quarterback has to rush for 17 touchdowns. It's not the case with somebody like Kenny. And that's where I start with him.
It's funny. The first time I remember watching Kenny Minchey scramble was in the blue gold, really looked like a runner, was in the blue gold game a year ago. I was like, yeah, okay. And then they ran it was a couple scrambles, and they ran an outside zone, like a designed outside zone that he scored a touchdown on. And you're like, okay, this isn't the guy that we saw in high school. And he would use his athleticism in high school to scramble around and buy time to throw. But I mean, if you look at his numbers, I'm actually going to pull up his stats as a junior and senior from when he signed with Notre Dame. Obviously I put that intel together, but here's what he had in 2022 as a junior. I think he rushed for less than 100 yards, but his whole career rushing statistics, he had 286 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. That was his whole high school career. And so that's what I say. People are thinking that he's the next Riley Leonard, or he is like, Malik Zaire. That's not who he is. He's more Ian Book than he is anyone else in regard to where Ian would have some occasional design runs, but Ian was a very good athlete. Ian used his athleticism to make plays as a scrambler. And that's more of where Kenny will be. I think even his rushing touchdown in the Purdue game, was that a I thought that was a scramble. Or was that a designed run? I'd have to go back and it was a designed run.
It was a zone read, wasn't it?
Okay. So he would pulled. Yeah, I have to go back and look at it, but he's not that dual threat guy. He is an athletic kid he's a pocket quarterback who's an athletic guy. He's not going to be if he's your starter, he's not like, okay, well, 3rd and 1, we're back to quarterback runs again. Occasionally, sure, but that's not who he is. But man, Trev, you talked about it. The arm talent is outstanding. And the big question on Kenny coming into really his second season last year was, okay, Kenny's a very talented player. Nobody ever questioned that. There were some questions that I heard about him in the recruiting process, and then also some questions his freshman year of, it's not that he doesn't work. It's not that he has a great attitude. He's very loved. I mean, his teammates loved Kenny Minchey. I've heard that from the minute he got here. very well-liked kid. But the question is, how does he want to be great at quarterback? Because you guys both know, I don't care how talented you are. If you don't have that drive to work every day, Vince, it doesn't matter how talented you are. You're going to fall short. And the question was, does Kenny really care about being a great player? In a lot of ways, I think Kenny answered some of those questions last year with his attitude, with his work ethic, with his performance. And then, of course, the big question was going to be, how does he compete this spring? And it wasn't just C.J. Carr's performance that led to Steve Angeli's departure. It was the combination of C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey in their performance. And so I think what Kenny did was Kenny showed that he earned the right this spring to say, we're going to go into the fall and it's a real battle because of how he performed. I do think his running ability gives him a little something extra there, but it's primarily about what he does throwing the ball. And when we were at the Jersey scrimmage, guys, we saw that. Some of the throws he made, like he had a seam route. I believe he threw the seam up the seam route that got dropped by Jack Larson, I believe.
Yeah,
I think it was him. I mean, you point to last year's Vince, you talked about the go route this year they overthrew. Remember the go route he threw for a touchdown against Micah Bell to I think it was Micah Gilbert, or was it KK Smith? It was Micah, wasn't it? Micah Gilbert in the 2024 Blue Gold game. I believe that also was a far hash throw. So Kenny's shown that he can make some big time plays. The question is going to be, there's two big questions I have now about Kenny, Vince, and they've been consistent. Is number one, Kenny is a notoriously slow starter. The only time he hasn't done that was this year's Jersey scrimmage in any type of setting we've seen. And he's got to improve there. And he still has a tendency to make the bad turnovers. And we saw that in the Jersey scrimmage this year where Kenny was cruising. And, I mean, I think it was like 2 plays before the pick. I think I looked over at you and I was like, dude, I think they're all playing well. But I'd say that right now, Kenny's probably played the best so far.
Yep.
Then he throws the pick that, if it's a scholarship cornerback, it's probably a pick 6. You go back and look at the pick he threw in last year's Blue Gold game where he just kind of chucks it up off his back foot, panics a little bit. He's got to eliminate that type of stuff. Some of that's just going to have to get worked out through experience, but some of that's also decision-making, and Kenny's going to have to improve some of that because when it's a battle between 2 really talented players, they're both going to turn the ball over at times. You want to avoid the bad turnovers. I said this, I don't view CJ's interception as a bad interception. It was a mistake. It was not a ball he should have thrown. I explained that, but a bad interception to me is you kill a scoring drive, you set the other team up for a scoring drive, or it's just dude, that was a terrible play. Like you threw the ball up. You didn't have a guy near it. You threw it off your back foot. That was just a sloppy play where you didn't look mentally like you knew what to do in that situation. You want to avoid those. And that's something that that Kenny's going to have to do a better job of. He did it in the spring game, I thought. And I thought his numbers in the spring game were not as good as I thought he actually played because he had a couple easy drops and the pressure wasn't always there. But I thought overall, Kenny's combination of arm talent, he's very smart. He's a very smart quarterback, picks up the offense very well. That's not going to be a question for either one of these two kids. But Kenny's always had a reputation as a really smart kid. You can have a lot of volume in the pass game when Kenny Minchey's your quarterback and C.J. Carr's your quarterback. That's going to be a difference from last year as well. But I just think this is a kid, guys, that just push comes to shove. He's got a big-time arm, and he can make some throws that a lot of people can't make. And that's why he's in this battle. Is that the running ability is it's a cherry on top. That's what it is to me, guys. Kenny's going to win this job because of what he can do, reading defenses and throwing the football. That's what's going to win him this job.
So, okay, great transition, sir. It's almost like you do this for a living. You said that's what's going to win him the job. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that think he's probably number 2, maybe going into it. Still competition, but maybe he's got some room to make up.
He's kind of
right?
1B.
Yeah, right. So he's got some ground to make up, going into the fall. So what does that look like as a coach, right? So we like to break it down. We come from a coach's perspective. So as a coach, Bryan, what does Kenny Minchey need to do to kind of close that gap a little bit and then become the 1A guy in the fall?
Number one, start faster. You can't come out early in fall camp the way that you have in the past. You've got to come out hot right away. And that's just big picture, but also each practice. Consistency is a big thing for Kenny. And I talked to a source last year that was, I was talking about the two young quarterbacks, and he was impressed with both of them, liked both of them. And the thing he said was, the thing about CJ Carr is he's just steady. You know what you're going to get every day. The thing about Kenny is there's days where you're like, dude, that guy's going to start for us at quarterback next year. And then there's other days you're like, that guy can't start for us at quarterback next year. That when you're the guy, you can work through some of those. This is the unfortunate thing that both of these young quarterbacks are in, is when you're just clearly the guy, Vince, you know this, you're allowed to work through some of those ups and downs. When you're in a battle with another very talented player and you don't have any sort of edge from experience or playing time, not any real edge in experience or playing time. Like Steve Angeli had a significant edge in experience and playing time, wasn't enough with the two younger quarterbacks. But it wasn't like significant in that he was like a full year starter or anything like that. If you don't have one of those advantages, guys, then the reality is you have to make sure that you're not, you can't have those ups and downs, and you better hope the other guy is too. Well, in this situation with what Kenny's going against, he's going against a guy that tends to be pretty steady. Kenny has more of the flash. When he's on, he's really good. When he's off, the offense sputters. We saw both of that in each of the last two spring games. And that's why CJ Carr has led the offense. And he led the offense on more scoring drives the last 2 years than either of the other two quarterbacks. There's a reason for that. Same thing with the jersey scrimmages that we saw the last 2 years. Just the offense just has moved better with CJ because of that consistency. If Kenny can become more of a consistent player and then maintain the hot streaks, where it's like when you come down from the hot streak, you're still pretty good. But when you're on the hot streak, you're like, okay, you're not stopping that guy. If he can do that, that's what gives him an opportunity to win the starting job, guys, because he's got all the arm talent to be a big-time quarterback, in my opinion. He's got the intelligence to pick up the offense at a high level, not just, okay, I know these 5 plays, but to just, master the offense with more time in the system as a starter. He's got leadership characteristics. They're different than CJ's. They're different than what Steve's are, just like Steve's are different than CJ's and CJ's are different than Riley's. But he's got leadership qualities where the team will follow him if he wins the job. That's one thing I'm not worried about in this battle is I think the team will follow whoever wins the job because they're both respected, and Kenny is as well. He's a guy that if he wins the job, the team will follow him. And so he's got, he can make any throw that Mike Denbrock will ask a quarterback to make. He throws a great deep ball. He's got accuracy. But again, that wavers. When he's on, he can be dude is Picasso when he's on. When he's off, he's finger painting. That's the thing here with Kenny is the consistency where it's you got to look like this guy more frequently. That's what he needs to do to win this job. And he's capable of doing it, guys. Like, everybody knows my opinion of who I think is going to win the starting job. I won't be shocked if Kenny Minchey goes out there and just rips it up day after day. And you're like, dude, this is what I thought was going to happen. But have you seen this 8 kid slinging this football around every day? Like, this is something special. He's got the ability to be that kind of player, but he's going to have to show it way more consistently. That's the thing for me, Trevor. I just need to see that version of Kenny. If I'm a coach, I need to see that version of Kenny far more consistently, because that's what gets you beat. You come out there and you look great against Miami and great against A&M and then, Purdue's whatever. And then you go on the road against Arkansas and you throw 3 picks and you're missing open throws. And next thing you know, you get upset by a 2-2 Arkansas team because it's the ups and downs. That's what can hurt you when the town around you is great. That is what'll ding you, is when you're now doing things that prevents the town around you from taking over. You're not the conductor anymore. You're now trying to go outside and and you're hurting the team. That's the type of thing Kenny's got to avoid. It's just that up and it's wild up and downs. Better this year than it was as a freshman. So now it's about taking that next step. And if he can do that, then this decision will be a lot harder for the Notre Dame coaches than what I think some people think that it'll be.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo the same things that you are talking about when we discuss on the field play. When you're in a quarterback competition that's this close, everything is on the table. You're evaluating on the field play, how you carry yourself on and off the field, what type of leader you are. It is no surprise to me whatsoever that the spring panned out the way that it did. I said going into the spring that I believe that there were going to be 2 quarterbacks that emerged, and this was going to carry over into the fall. For Kenny, he now has to show the coaching staff that he can be the guy, not one of the guys. Out of the spring, you just had to be one of the guys that was still in competition heading into fall. And he showed that he could do that. But that's going to be the next step in his maturation as the leader of this offense, one of the leaders of the team, is, hey, you have to go from being, like you said, everybody loves him, and I completely understand why. But when you're the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, you carry a little bit more of a heavier burden than, say, what the starting slot receiver at Notre Dame has to carry on a week-to-week basis. And so he's going to have to show a different level of maturation from, hey, I'm just one of the guys. You know, everybody loves me. Like, I have all the talent in the world, because he does. To now that has to evolve into, hey, I can be the guy. I can be the person that you can rely on when it's 3rd and 7 in a close ball game in the postseason, and you can put the ball in my hands and I'll go out and make a play. So that's going to be part of his evolution, and the consistency, you know, minimizing the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, because all young quarterbacks go through the ebbs and flows of, yo, that's why he's our guy. Then you have other moments like, okay, yeah, it's his first season starting. Mm-hmm. But as long as that highest of highs isn't a Heisman level performance, and the lowest of lows is that's who the starting quarterback is. If you can find somewhere in between that for your lows, they're going to be in a really good spot. But Kenny has all the potential in the world to take the job, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he won because of his talent. But there's just some things that he's going to have to get cleaned up from now until August 31st.
There's another guy in this race, and he is a rising sophomore, redshirt freshman, you know, whatever delineation that you want to give him. And of course, that is the man with the famous last name, and that is CJ Carr. And, you know, he's got all the hype in the world on him. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, he's got a lot of hype on him. He's coming into this thing. We talked about Kenny, you know, basically being 1B right now and what he needs to do to close that gap. So that obviously means that CJ Carr is 1A now.
In my opinion, based on what I'm hearing, I believe that to be true. Yeah.
And that's fair. And I think we've echoed that, you know,
1A, 1B is still better than, for Kenny, still better than 1 and 2.
100%. So the conversation is a little bit different here. It's, how does CJ maintain that gap or make it bigger and make it clear that he is the starter, and this is where things should go?
Yeah, well, before I kind of dive into what he has to do to win the job, I want to talk about why he's so hyped.
Of course.
Like that's my
and who is CJ Carr and all of that.
Right. Yeah, and that's really because I think there's a lot, and this is it's funny because CJ gets some of this. There's some weird pushback on CJ that Kenny doesn't get from parts of the fan base, and I even think the media. And it's because it goes into why some people loved Steve Angeli. There's just a segment of the fan base that just loves the blue collar, not as talented guy. There's a perception that Kenny's that way. I don't believe it to be true, because Kenny's very talented, but
super talented.
With Kenny, it's that he's just not the big name guy.
Right.
You know, no one but, you know, Irish Breakdown and Sports Illustrated, who had Kenny in the top 100 primarily because of me, viewed him as a top 100 quarterback coming out. Now, they didn't think he was a bum. They had him in the top 250, but they didn't have him ranked as high as we did. And whereas CJ was kind of the golden boy, you know, came from, you even said it, famous family, and his dad played at Michigan. His uncle or his grandfather won a national championship at Michigan, as the head football coach, and was a legendary figure there, and a very well-respected person in the coaching profession. And there's this segment of the fan base, and it's not very big in my opinion, but they're very vocal, that I think resents that a little bit. They resent the hype. They resent they just can't enjoy success, and they just look at a guy like CJ, and he's had everything handed to him. He's a famous name. I've had people come at me on social media well, you only say that because he's a big name. And I'm like, you actually think, like, as you follow me on social media and you think that I actually care about that. Like, there's no argument you can make that makes you think that that's you projecting your sort of, some people just don't like success. They don't like people who come, who come out of, successful families, and they're, and there's just that. And that's something CJ is going to have to overcome, because right now he's still Lloyd Carr's grandson.
Right.
Eventually his goal is to make people say Lloyd Carr is CJ Carr's grandpa. You know what I'm saying?
100%. I don't care if his name's AJ Smith or whatever.
Right.
You pick a name, right? Like, if you would have told me,
part of the
it is
burden on CJ's shoulders.
It totally is
where it comes from.
No, it totally is. But I would tell people to just sit and watch,
right?
And just don't even pay attention to who it is. Just
pretend his last name is Anderson, and his dad drives a UPS truck.
Just watch him throw the football.
And his mom is a driving balloon salesman. And by the way, those aren't things I mock. That's literally what my parents did when I was in high school.
Okay, that's a very specific example.
Truck driver, and my mom would drive around selling, those little balloons on sticks to grocery stores. That's what my parents did.
It's just a very specific example.
Right, but it's like what I mean is they're just blue collar, good, hardworking, blue collar Midwestern family, right? Just trying to, which I think CJ's family is. They just happen to come from a family where the grandpa was a great football coach.
Yeah.
But when you look at CJ Carr, let's get into like the actual reason why he's in this battle. And it's not because his last name's Carr. It's because he's extremely talented. And you're talking about a guy that as we talked about with Kenny, very smart player, very heady player, very serious player. See, like CJ's got a fun side to him. You saw that in some of the different, but like when it comes to football, CJ's a very serious football player. He's a very focused football player. He's a guy that mentally has all the things you look for, leadership qualities. It was good to see, Trevor, my prediction was correct, by the way. When we talked about they have the weekly awards for who works the best. And that first week, CJ Carr was on it. And I said, $20 says Kenny Minchey's going to be on it next week. He was. But it was encouraging to see CJ on there, because I think that's one of the questions you have with a lot of young quarterbacks who are kind of grow up in this 7-on-7 era, is they think working hard is just going out there and throwing all the time. But, CJ's putting in the other work, and I think it's important for him to build up his body. He needs to build up his body more than CJ does to have sort of the armor to make it through a full season. But, when you start looking at the arm talent, guys, that's what really separates. And I think there's some in the national media that didn't look at CJ as well as I think they should have. And I'm mainly referring to one network here, and I think that was because he doesn't have like the big body. He's not 6'4", 215, and he doesn't have an absolute bazooka for an arm. CJ's not going to get confused for Patrick Mahomes. But I think having that view sleeps on the fact that he still has a strong arm. He can make every throw you need him to make. He's got a lightning quick release. He's a guy that can also throw off platform. Sometimes you have some of those younger players that are really good passers, like in a 7-on-7 setting, but then like when you got to play off script, it's not there as much. You watch CJ's junior film, and then especially senior film, where I didn't think his offensive line was quite as good as it was his junior year. He had to do a lot of stuff off platform and off script. He had to make throws off platform and make plays off script, is what I'm trying to say. And he had the ability to do that. He can scramble. He had a 75-yard touchdown run brought back in his high school career. But it's really about the ability, guys, where what it comes down to CJ is he's an elite decision maker at his age. And I would even argue not even at his age. Just going back to last spring, Vince, you and I were at the blue gold, or were you at the Jersey scrimmage last year? Do you remember CJ's banging backside dig reads? Guys, that's option 3, sometimes 4.
Yeah,
for the Notre Dame quarterback.
Yeah.
And he did it again this year. He was off target on this one, but he hit Cam Williams on a backside dig. That was not his primary read. He shows a great grasp of the offense. He shows excellent timing as a passer. In last year's blue gold game, you also saw him make throws on the run, multiple throws on the run. He had the one throw to Cooper Flanagan, I believe, on the run. He's got very good accuracy on the run. And he has the ability to throw the ball down the field. I mean, guys, we've seen him play in 4 competitive games at Notre Dame. The 2 Jersey scrimmages and the 2 blue gold games. In those games, he's thrown a post route for a touchdown to Cam Williams. That was the Jersey scrimmage last year. He had the walk-off over-the-top post route that Elijah Burris catches on the back of the end zone. It was like a 40-plus yard bomb just over the top of the defense, boom, in the back line. And then he had the go route touchdown to Micah Gilbert last year. And I'm trying to remember, what was his second? He had two deep touchdown passes last year, didn't he? Or was it just the one? But I can remember the one to the left side to Micah Gilbert, and I thought he had two touchdown passes last year, but that was a go route. And then this year he throws a go route to Xavier Southall for a walk-off touchdown. And so we've seen him he can hit all parts of the field. He hit two corner routes over the top, or he had a slot fade and a corner route over the top in the blue gold game for big plays. And so he can hit the quick game. He makes good decisions, like even just the little thing of reading the edge defense who wanted to bat the ball down to Kedron Young. So he just waits, he pumps, holds it, lets Kedron clear so he can then get the ball over top of the defense for a big play. He's a wicked smart quarterback. He's the most accurate quarterback Notre Dame has had as a prospect since Jimmy Clausen. Now we need to see if he can do that on game days, but in practice and in high school, he's the most accurate quarterback I've seen since Jimmy Clausen. And accuracy isn't just about completion percentage. It's knowing when to put the ball on the back hip, knowing when to put the ball low and away, knowing whether to throw a back shoulder on the shoulder or high. It's knowing when to stop a receiver in the hole. You may look at a guy like, well, he threw the ball behind him. No, the receiver was going to run out of the window. He put it in the window and made the guy stop and catch the ball. CJ does all those things, guys. And the second one he threw on a Don Schuler, you're just like, that ball had no business being caught by Jack Larson. Now, number one, that shows that Jack Larson's got great hands, which we told you all about. But it also was like, that's the only place he could have thrown that ball to get caught. If he misses by 2 inches, that's a breakup. Either way, short or long, that was the exact spot where that ball could get caught. Because the Don's like, dude, I'm in great position here. I don't know exactly what you're asking me to do on this play. And that's the kind of throw that CJ can make that it's just very rare. And those are the traits that CJ Carr brings to the table, which is why he's in the position he is in. Wicked smart, in great arm talent. Now, we got to find out if he can do that in real games. That's true for Kenny as well. But you want to know why a redshirt freshman is potentially leading this quarterback battle? It's because as a passer, he can do things that Notre Dame has not seen since Jimmy Clausen. I'm just going to flat out come and say it. You can say it's hype. It is hype. But it's not hyperbole. It's hype because it's like, dude, that's a lot of – you're putting a lot on that kid. I know, but I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to overhype him. But that's just what we see, guys. And what was nice about the blue gold game is fans started to see what we're talking about. Like, guys, we see CJ Carr in practice, and we don't even get to see that many practices. But we get to see him make throws like that all the freaking time.
Yeah.
And that's why I still don't understand why people – there was one Notre Dame site, somebody sent me a screenshot. One of the writers said when Steve left, they said, well, I always knew Kenny was number 2, but I had the wrong guy at number 1. And I'm thinking, this is after the spring. I'm thinking, you saw all the same practices I did, the Jersey scrimmage and the blue gold game, and you thought he was 3rd?
I just don't get that.
Like, it just
I don't know what
mind.
people are watching. Because to your point, I haven't seen in a very, very long time the combination, and this is where CJ Carr gets my nod, right? It's the combination of decision-making, quick release, and that the quick release is something that I think is overlooked by a lot of fans because the quick release makes up for the fact that he doesn't have an absolute howitzer on his shoulder, right? Because he's accurate, he's got a quick release, and he puts the ball where it's supposed to go. So when he makes the decision, it gets where it needs to go very quickly, okay? That was always the issue when you would compare him with anybody else. It's like, okay, well, the decision was made to go to that spot, but the ball didn't get there in time. Or it was, it was late, or it was, whatever the case may be. There was some arc to it. It got to where it needed to go on time, on target, every single time, basically. And that's what sets CJ Carr apart from a lot of other quarterbacks. It starts up here, obviously. It starts with the mental, right? He understands this offense. He understands how to operate within this offense, and he understands what the offense is trying to accomplish. Okay. And that's going to be very, very important. We talked at the top of the show about whoever the quarterback is going to be, they've got to play within the offense. They've got to use the tools that are around them, the talent that is around them. CJ Carr understands this offense. He understands the talent that's around him, and he will distribute the football. The next part for me is that not only is he distributing it, but he's distributing it quickly and on target. That is why he is where he's at, in my opinion. We'll see how this goes and what he needs to do to maintain that, which is going to be the key.
Now, here's my one knock, Trev, on CJ. Sometimes I think the reason that I was, and some people lost their minds when I said this, part of the reason I was actually okay with the interception he threw is because it was a risky throw. And with the exception of some over-the-top stuff, one of my concerns about CJ is I think because he's so smart, sometimes I think he's unwilling to maybe let loose of one and put it into a tough spot. And especially kind of over the middle. Now, part of that I like because I don't want you forcing a lot of balls over the middle. But CJ has the tools to be more dynamic on a more consistent basis. And the Jersey scrimmage was a perfect example. What was CJ's struggle? And I didn't call it struggle, but why was he getting outplayed by Kenny early in the scrimmage? Because he just wasn't on a couple throws willing to pull the trigger on some tight window throws that he then later made. So it's like, okay, you're going to have to just let it rip sometimes, and it's okay to make a mistake. I think CJ's one of those quarterbacks that just doesn't want to make a mistake. He doesn't want to do something that costs his team. And I think sometimes, dude, it's okay to take that chance. That's why the blue gold game was so encouraging to me, because that was some of the most aggressiveness we've ever. CJ will make some of those great throws. But what was different about this first one, and then also about the throw that got picked off, the first one was not a normal read one-on-one. He's going to give his guy a shot. It was the read broke down, the play broke down. He then had to backpedal and make a play. And he made the play on the throw to Kevin Bauman. CJ makes throws like that all the time when he's just in the pocket, going through the read and letting it rip. And so I think being more assertive is going to be one of the things that I need to see from CJ to really improve his game. And I guess I kind of probably jumped the gun a little bit on the what does he need to do to win the job, but that's not all of it. But if we're talking about all things he does well, why is it still a competition then? Well, number one, because Kenny's also really talented. But number two, I think that you need to make sure that CJ continues to be pushed, because he needs to understand there's a fine line between forcing balls and being willing to take some chances. And I think that's the one thing I need to see from CJ if you're talking about what's left in his game, on top of he still needs to get stronger in order to hold up for a 15, 16-game season. That's the biggest thing for CJ Carr this offseason is, can you put that armor on you need to get to a 15, 16-game season?
Willingness to take the shot is something that has been lacking out of the quarterback room for quite some time in South Bend. To your point, Bryan, that's why I was also extremely encouraged by the blue gold game. From what I saw from genuinely all three quarterbacks. All three quarterbacks were willing to take shots down the field, more specifically Kenny and CJ. But for CJ, when I look at him, his strengths, he is an elite processor of the game. I cannot put that more into words. I'm so impressed by what I see from him on a practice to practice, a blue gold game to blue gold game type of environment, because you do see that level of consistency. Look, if you just take Blake Hebert's physical attributes, 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds, absolute hose of an arm, and you put that onto CJ Carr with all of his mental attributes, his accuracy, so on and so forth, he's the most talked about quarterback short of Arch Manning in this offseason. But because of some of what people perceive to be his physical limitations, that's why he's not maybe gaining some of the hype, and why some recruiting services might not have viewed him as the high caliber recruit that he was. I agree with everything that you guys said about his ability to be an accurate passer. He can make every throw on the field, but I cannot harp on enough. His mental capabilities in the pocket is not even good for a redshirt freshman. That's good for a starting quarterback at an elite college level. And it's so impressive. And it's not like that's something he figured out how to do this past March. He started doing it the moment he walked on campus. And so he's a really impressive kid. But I'm with you. For him to edge out, to kind of move this train along here, for him to kind of fend off right now, I would say, Kenny Minchey, from taking that next step, and for CJ to also take that next step, he does need to be willing to take more chances downfield, because that's something where last season Riley would be real gun shy until the game got to the point where it's like, well, we might lose, so I might as well anyways. And then good things happen. Now that you're getting a big weapon like Malachi Fields in the boundary, be willing to take those shots downfield for sure.
Yeah. I think we need to address something too, because this is where I think a common misunderstanding of what we're saying is, and I tried to make it very clear, and it still wasn't received. But somebody in the chat said, but wouldn't you say that with the run game and perceived top 25 defense, isn't Carr's ball protection a major reason why he's likely to win the job? Why force something down the field? Won't that come later? Again, I said very clearly, there's a very big difference between taking a shot and forcing the ball into bad coverage. There's a big difference, very big difference. And we're not talking about, hey, you got a guy between four guys, try to throw it 100 miles an hour in between that guy 25 yards down the field. That's forcing the ball. This is more of, you got a one-on-one, take that chance, make that play off script. Things break down, you got to go make that play. Because when you look at to win a championship, you can't just be a game manager for 16 games. There's going to come a point in time when you're going to have to make some of those plays. Riley Leonard, for example, you've got to be able to willing to make that tough back shoulder 3rd and 9 throw to Jaden Greathouse. You've got to be able to make that throw where you're scrambling around and you find Jaden Greathouse coming from behind. You've got to be able to make some of those throws on top of some of the other things. So it's not about asking CJ to force a bunch of balls down the field. It's about, dude, you had the one-on-one. It was very tight coverage. Take that chance. Hey, the seam route to your backside, and this is a real one. This is from the Jersey scrimmage this year, is there was a seam route to, I think it was Will Pauling, that was open, but it was going to be a bit of a tight window. And that's a throw I want CJ to make. It's not about forcing the ball. It's about the window's a little tighter there. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because if you make a mistake there, you get picked. It's be willing to take that shot. And, maybe early in the season it doesn't work out, but the next time you take it, the third time you take it. But the other thing, too, is part of this is learning what throws you can and can't make. That's why I like to see those things in a Jersey scrimmage, because now CJ knows that's not the ball to throw there. But the one that Kevin Bauman, this is why we want you to be willing to take some of those chances. Give that big 6'5" tight end a chance to go make a play. That's what we're talking about. It's not about forcing a 3rd and 7 throw in between three guys and the window's that big and it's, and the ball's that big. That's not what we're talking about. But you've got to be willing to take some of those chances when they're there. And that's what hurt Riley at times last year, guys. He just wasn't willing to take chances on certain plays and on certain parts of the field. And that's why the offense bogged down. But when they fell behind and he was forced to make those throws, he made them. Ian Book was similar to that way, where Ian Book's difference was Ian Book was struggled to – he was not willing to even take the one-on-ones, and a lot of times unless they were behind. But part of the reason that Ian was so much better in the fourth quarter when they were behind than he was in the first three is because in the fourth quarter he had no choice but to just let it rip. And so you've got to be willing to come out and say, hey, look, perfect example. It's a nothing ball game. We're in the Cotton Bowl. We're playing Clemson's great defense. I got a one-on-one with Miles Boykin in the boundary corner. And I see it. Safety comes down. I got a one-on-one. There's outside pressure. I got to climb and let it go. And give my guy, it's not wide open, but it's wide open again. It's open against Clemson, open. I got to be willing to take that shot. Climb the pocket, let her rip. Make the play. Notre Dame's had too many quarterbacks that just were unwilling to take that throw when the game was tight. They would always wait till they were down to make that throw, or where they had no choice. If I make a mistake, well, I had to throw it. We were down 10 points. Those are the throws that I want to see CJ be more willing to make. And, that's what's going to separate him between being a really good quarterback and an elite quarterback is, are you willing to make some of those throws? Every team that wins a championship or even plays for a championship will have games where their quarterback has to make those kind of throws in clutch moments. And CJ's got to be willing to make those throws. We're talking 2-3 a game, maybe. it's not the prominent, but that's the difference between losing to Georgia and beating Georgia in the future, or losing to Ohio State and beating Ohio State, on top of the other things he brings to the table. There are some certain things that Riley Leonard was missing in the first half against Ohio State that it's like CJ Carr will make that throw in his sleep. But then CJ Carr is also not going to go out there and run the ball 9 times in the first drive. So there's some give and take. But the point is, those throws you expect to make now. But he's still going to be asked to make some of those really tough ones. Is he willing to take them? Because if he is, I think he'll hit them. He's got the ability to hit them. And that's why I think the blue gold game was so important for him, is because he made some off script, not within the flow of the offense, big plays. And I'm hoping he can build on that.
So anything else you guys want to say about CJ Carr before we kind of move on to the next part of our show? Just want to throw it up there.
I just think it's going to be about going out this summer and fall and establishing himself as a leader. That's going to be big for CJ. If he wants to beat out Kenny, it's about doing that. And then it's about, as I mentioned, showing a little bit more playmaking ability. Because as I said in the Kenny section, CJ's steady, Kenny's flashy. Well, if Kenny establishes a level of consistency along with the flash, then that means CJ also needs to be more willing to make some of those throws like he did in the blue gold game, where he makes the off platform, your off script, corner route. Maybe look like a corner route to Kevin Bauman over the top, being willing to maybe make some more of those plays that are, you just, dude, this is one of those times we need you to go make a play now. We're backed up. They read the defense read the play. The play's not supposed to work. Need you to do something. And then CJ made it. That's what he's got to do more of if he's going to win this job. Kenny makes those kind of plays. Then Kenny will miss on some of the basics. But if Kenny starts hitting the basics and he's still making plays, then CJ is going to need to be willing to do that with his arm in those moments. So that's going to be the key for CJ, is maintain your consistency, but also show a little bit more playmaking ability like he did in the blue gold game this year and in the blue gold game last year. That's going to be the key for CJ. But I think he's capable of it. That's why I think going into the summer, I think he's in the pole position for this job. And it's going to be more about Kenny beating him out, but he still has a lot to prove. And then it's just, don't let the battle get to you. This is true for both young men. Don't let the battle get to you. Right. And I think it was CJ that said this in the spring. He's like, we're not really competing against each other, but we are, in that, like, I'm not going out there to try to outplay somebody else, but we're pushing each other. And that's a good thing, as long as you keep it there. When it starts to get into, well, shoot, this guy made that play, now I got to try something here, and you get outside of the framework of what the offense is telling you to do, that's when you can get into trouble. We've all seen it, guys, whether it's, teams we've coached or watching games. Like, that's what happened to Malik Zaire in 2016. Malik went in the game thinking, I got to go show something special to win this job, and that forced Malik into mistakes because he was put in that position. And these guys have to avoid those type of things. If they're both going to have to do that. For CJ, I think that's especially true, but that's what he's going to have to do to win this job.
That's going to wrap up our little evaluation of each player in particular. In the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com and irishbreakdown.com, because there's good stuff all over the place. So if you want to be part of if you want to be in the know, you've got to get and be a part of the Irish Breakdown family over at boards.irishbreakdown.com.
Before we move on, fellas, to the next section, I just saw this message board thing. This is from our guy, I Am Tenzin. And I always give I Am Tenzin a hard time for getting off topic and not talking about football stuff. But this, my dude, and I'm just kidding. I don't, we've talked about this. This right here, though, this is an off topic thing I'm all about. He says, no question, but we did an elective ultrasound this weekend, and we found out that our next airbender is going to be our first girl. Baby number 4 coming soon. Congratulations, my man. That is awesome. We will certainly pray for your wife and for the baby that's coming along, for their safety, that the baby grows healthy and strong, and that your wife is good through this process, man. But I know Vince is a girl dad. He's a three-time girl dad, right? So he's kind of opposite you. His oldest is a boy, his youngest is a boy, and there's a bunch of girls in between. So that's actually not a bad way to do it.
No, that worked
this
out.
is a good way to do it too, where your first girl's got 3 older brothers. And I'm sure, knowing IM10s, and he's going to make sure them boys are taught to.
Hey, listen,
this is
my
who
son,
you got to take care of.
My son was a senior, and the twins were freshmen this year,
Mm-hmm.
and he had to take out the trash a couple times.
That's
you know
right.
I mean? If you know what I'm saying.
That's right.
It helps.
Dude, we're certainly happy for you, man, and we're excited for you. Another member of the IB family coming along, but we are glad you're experiencing that, and congratulations to you and your wife. I'm sure she's happy to get a little bit more estrogen in the home. It's a lot of testosterone in that home, but man, we're super happy for you, and I appreciate you sharing that with us here at IB, man. We're pumped about that.
All right, gentlemen, for this part of the show, let's kind of jump into some predictions, I guess, some prognostications about what this quarterback position could be for this year, for 2025, and what needs to happen. So we're going to kind of follow our normal kind of outline for how we do the position preview. And obviously there are less people involved in the quarterback position preview, but still a very important position. And we're going to treat it like any other position. So we're going to kind of go through our biggest questions, what needs to, be proven, some matchups, and then some bold predictions. So we're going to kind of jump right into this thing, guys, with very simply, who wins the job? I mean, this is going to be the most publicized battle of the offseason, the quarterback position at Notre Dame. And you got 2 guys that are competing for it. CJ Carr, redshirt freshman, Kenny Minchey, redshirt sophomore. Who wins the job and why?
Trev, you going to start off? Am I starting off? Who's kicking this thing off? Why don't you go ahead and start off, Trev?
Yeah, Trev, start off.
Yeah, when I look at this quarterback competition, one, it's definitely big of who wins. I'm more focused on the how. If this is a competition that is truly neck and neck of, man, today Kenny came out and was just absolutely tearing up the first team defense. And then, CJ the next day comes out and just absolutely rips apart the first team defense. Or it could even be within the same practice. 7-on-7, so-and-so is dealing. Then in team period, the other person's dealing. One-on-ones, the other person's dealing. That is the quarterback competition that I want to see. The how is going to be extremely important for me, because I don't want it to be a situation where one of the 2 guys, to not put any names on one person specifically, where one guy just potentially, and I don't foresee this happening, but one guy just crumbles under the pressure of, oh gosh, now I finally have my potential moment in the limelight. Because, spoiler alert, the limelight as starting quarterback at Notre Dame is not going to end definitively when you win the starting job after fall camp is over, right? So I go and I think about the how. Is it truly the best person won, or is it, the other person just really didn't show up to bat? And so by default, we go with quarterback A, or by default, we go with quarterback B. And so that's what I'm going to be paying attention to as the summer progresses. And then July 31st, before we know it's going to roll around, because I already can't believe June is already halfway over. And then fall camp is going to be right around the corner. If it is truly the hype of this quarterback competition that we've been hearing about since January 21st, this is it. This is the main course, if you will, of what we've been talking about now for really the last 6 months. I hope it lives up to the hype of that, because I want to see both players succeed in Kenny and CJ. That's where I start when I'm looking at this quarterback competition, and when we decide, not we, but when the coaching staff decides who wins this job.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very political answer. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I think the key here, when you talk about what the question is we don't know who's going to win the job. But what's important here is that somebody needs to win the job. Like, that's the key. It can't, because if somebody, Trev talks about, Vince, you said he gave a very political answer. Well, here's the point. If you talk about politics in a room, if there's not a very clear leader and one guy gets put above the other, that's when players start thinking, well, why was that guy given the job? Why was that guy given the job? And that's where you start to have some issues. Sure. Somebody needs to step up, and it's very clear to the team that that's the guy. I think number one, that makes it easier for the number two to swallow. Like, look, the guy just freaking outplayed me like every day almost. Like, it's like, I get it. Not, he may leave, but that, he's going to be a better teammate during the season, and he'll be more bought in during the season because like that guy outplayed him. But then also it's great it's important in the locker room that somebody seizes it. And honestly, guys, it's better if somebody wins it earlier than later. I don't care when Notre Dame announces who starts at quarterback. I don't. They could wait till Sunday morning they could wait till not even announce it and just whoever takes the first snap of the game. I don't care when they announce it. I care that the team knows as early as possible. But that's got to come down to someone proving it as opposed to an arbitrary deadline the coaches set for themselves. Hey, we want to have a starter decided by practice 10. Well, what if one doesn't emerge? What if either they're both playing well or neither of them have really kind of separated? Well, then you need to maybe push beyond that arbitrary deadline. And the 10-day practice 10 is literally something I made up. It's not like the staff is doing that or my sources are telling me by practice 10. I literally just made that up. And what I would say is probably a good gauge. If you're talking about 25 practices, 10 get you, you're past the third way mark. It's a good number of practices. You've seen a lot, but it also gives your starter a lot more time to prepare, whatever. But if it's okay, but what if a guy does it in 5? What if a guy does it in 19? Like, you've got to make sure that the pick is right. And the other thing is you need to have conviction in your decision, because let's say that Notre Dame is not convicted in their decision and they have a short hook for the guy that starts. Then are you going to have a short hook for the guy that comes in second? So you're telling me that this one guy through the whole spring and the whole winter, spring, summer, fall camp wins the job, but then if he struggles early and you yank him, you're telling me you're now going to give a longer hook, a longer leash to the guy that lost the job? Now you get into this musical chair as a quarterback where this guy goes in, does some good things, but then ends up failing, and now you're back to the other guy. That's how you break a quarterback's mind. That's how you break a quarterback's confidence, I should say, in himself, is playing the musical chairs. Whoever wins the job, that's your guy until he proves that he's not. And there's very rare occasions that he proves he's not in a short period of time. It happens from time to time, or once you get to games, that guy comes off the sideline and you're like, dude, that's not the same kid that we have in practice. Some guys are just that way. And he just gets that look in his head like, this guy is not with it now that there's 70,000 screaming people. And he's great at practice when it's just us, but clearly he's not that guy. I highly doubt that either one of these quarterbacks are that way. But you just can't be that way. And it can be tempting when you have another talented guy, but there's a reason that one guy wins the job. My point, however, is if one guy is the clear winner, then the odds of them having a more necessarily longer hook are going to increase. And that's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you start talking about the short hooks, it kind of starts begging the question, what are some of the expectations for the QB1 or QB2 heading into this season? Now, I don't know how you wanted to take this, if we're talking from a numbers perspective or a week-to-week performance perspective. But, Bryan, when you start talking about how long of a leash are you going to give quarterback A or B, what is that final hook going to be of, okay, maybe we just need to give the other guy a shot? What does that expectation look like for you?
Say that again. I'm trying to grasp that.
Just talking about what the expectations are for whoever wins the job.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
There's a tendency for fans to see a bad performance in, say, a half or a game or a stretch of a couple games, and it's automatically, all right, it's on to the next person. For example, this past season, Riley Leonard played decent against Texas A&M, more specifically in the fourth quarter, final drive. Bad game against NIU, people were calling for number 18 to jump into the starting lineup. So when you look at two guys that have yet to start, what are those expectations going to be for them that may warrant or may not warrant getting pulled early?
I think it's a couple things. And the biggest one is just that he's overwhelmed. He's just overwhelmed and he can't rebound. And it's just like, I got in a funk. I can't get out of the funk. I'm making bad decisions. I'm rushing everything. I have no comfort in the pocket. And that's like there's times where a guy struggles. He comes to the sideline and you're like, he's good. He's got to get into the groove. He's fine. He's settled down. He's not freaking out. He knows why he made the mistake. Where you get, and every coach has been through this with a player, whether it's a quarterback or another position or whatever. And he comes back and it's like, what happened? And he's talking to you and you're like, that's not what happened. I saw Vince. I know you've seen it. And he's like, this kid has no clue why he made the mistake he made.
Well, and that's why I'll be honest with you, Bryan. That's why getting the video on the sideline
is huge.
Is life changing.
But why it's important to speak to a guy before you do this. You want him to tell you what was going through his head.
100%.
Because as a coach, you're like, no, I saw the safety where, like, coach, I didn't see. And he's panicking and he's rushed and he's forced and he's just can't calm down.
Right.
That's when you know, hey, we may need to go somewhere else.
Right.
But then it's like that's the main one, Trevor, where you're like, this kid is just panicked.
Right.
I'm honestly not worried about that with either one of these quarterbacks. That's the main thing. But I also think I'll say a personal example, right? So my redshirt sophomore year, I told you I played receiver as a freshman, transferred schools, moved back to quarterback, and it was down to me and another guy. And basically, they were going to give him a start, see how he did, and then I was going to get a start. He was older than I was. He had been there. I was a transfer. And then I was going to get a start. Well, his start came against the best team we played that year, a team that we had no chance of beating. My start came against my old school, where I was a little fired up, but they weren't as good. Well, I outplayed him in my start. But was it really fair to him? Because his one start was against by far the best team we played. For me, it worked out great. But as a coach, if I was his dad or if I was Ray, I'd be like, well, this doesn't seem fair. He gets to start against this team who's not that good, and I got to start against this team? Like, so there's also the thought of, well, let's say the one guy starts first two games and struggles against Miami and A&M, and then they put the other guy in game 3 and he lights up Purdue. Is that really fair? How do we know the other guy wouldn't have lit up Purdue?
Right.
Like, that's the other reason you got to be a little bit slower with that hook is you need to – it may not be fair to the one guy because you don't know that if you'd have reversed it, that other guy wouldn't have struggled even worse against the two best teams you're going to play all year. So that's another reason why I think they need to be a little bit more patient is if he gets out there against Purdue and you're seeing the same stuff against Purdue that you saw the first two games and you kind of like, okay, yeah, this may not work. So it's just more of an attitude thing. It's more of a, how's he feeling? Like, and also you got to give a guy room to kind of overcome mistakes. But if he's just constantly like struggling with the same stuff, it's like, okay, this he may not have it on game day. He may be a great practice player, but he doesn't have it on game day. So
we've all seen that. I mean, we've all seen kids that just light it up in practice, and then when they get in the game, that either the lights are too bright or you just can't do it under pressure. Like you just can't do it. Again, I don't see that being the case. We're talking in generalities as to why we would pull a quarterback. I don't foresee that being an issue with either one of these guys. I just don't see them built in a manner in which they won't perform when their number is called. Like I just don't see that being the case. But in that instance, that is when you would make a switch.
And then also just consistently subpar play. He's just not just making the reads. He's not executing. He's But you got to get, because here's the thing: once you make that switch with these two types of players, there's no going back.
Right, exactly.
You got to assume you're going to lose the confidence of the kid that you benched. You better be real careful that you don't do it too quick, because what if the other guy struggles and now you've got two quarterbacks with shaking
Yeah, you can't play Russian roulette with the quarterbacks in and out. Like that's just not going to work. So if you're Mike Denbrock, you're Marcus Freeman, you're going down to Miami, you're welcoming Texas A&M in week 2, all of those different things. What are you putting on the shoulders of whichever quarterback it is? What are you putting on their shoulders? I mean, what are you expecting from the quarterback?
Trev, it's simple. Do your job. I don't need you to win the high. CJ, I don't need you to answer every doubter in game 1. CJ or Kenny, I don't need you to go prove the world wrong that you're better than they thought you were in game one. Whatever the reason that they're putting that pressure on themselves, you want to remove it. Just do your job. Don't make bad mistakes. Do your job. Play within the offense. And then trust me that if I'm making a play call, I'm putting you in a position to be successful. And then trust your teammates to do their jobs and just get the ball where it needs to go to. Don't put a lot on his plate. He's got to make a million checks. You know, he might have to be involved in setting pressures, but, you know, make sure that the running backs and the O-line know y'all have veto power. Ashton Craig, you have veto power, but have a communication system and those type of things where you just do your job. You don't need to worry about everybody else to a certain degree. You've got to worry about everybody. You got to make sure guys are lined up correctly, make sure everyone's set. But, like, you don't need to worry about how Malachi Field's going to run his route. Just trust that he's going to do that and get the ball where it needs to go to. I think that's the big thing, Trev. It's getting them to understand, bro, we're not winning the national title on August 31st. It's 1 of 12. That's it. You know, you're not silencing any doubt. You know, that's why you also got to make sure they're not looking over their shoulder. Whether it's CJ or Kenny, you won the battle. Go out there and play ball. Don't worry about who's on the sideline. Don't worry about what we're going to say or do. Now, in your head, you may say, like, I wasn't really sure if this was the guy anyway. But he can't think that. He has to think that you fully support him. And it's just, man, just go do your job. Let your teammates have your back. You got 10 guys who have your back. Just do your job, get the ball where it needs to go to, and we'll be fine. And then call the game to where you're also asking him not to then, because it's one thing to say that, and then you're like, okay, we're going to throw the ball 9 in the first 10 times. We're going to go empty and throw the ball 9 of your first 10 snaps, and it's a lot of downfield vertical stuff. Well, okay, you asked him not to, just to do his job, but then you're asking him to go be Joe Burrow in this first series of college football. Maybe that's not the best thing. Doesn't mean don't throw it. I mean, I'm all for just throwing a bomb on the first play of the game. I'd love to see that as long as it's a one-on-one. But it's more so like we're not going to ask him to go win the Heisman Trophy on August 31st. We're not going to ask him to win the national championship on August 31st. It's, bro, do your job. See that number 4? See that number 24? See that number 1? See that number 6? See that number, what was Will Pauling in this? What was he number 1 or 2? And whatever Malachi Fields is, see those cats? See number 9? You can't miss him. See him over there? That like 6'7" and a half guy that's 250. Yeah, see him? Guys, man, just get them the ball. Let them cook. They're the stars. You're my John Stockton. You're not Magic. You're not Mike. You're not Larry. You're not Kobe. You're John Stockton. John Stockton's a Hall of Famer, but John Stockton was like setting everybody else up. Just get it where it needs to go to. That's who I need you to be. Get the ball where it needs to go to. And then call the game and accordingly for him.
So, Trevor, I'm going to throw this to you now. That's the expectation up front for these quarterbacks going into the season. When does the tide start to shift a little bit to where you start putting a little bit more on the quarterbacks and you start kind of, we use the analogy of being the conductor of the train. When are you allowing him to actually be the conductor and not just, sitting in the dining car along for the ride?
Yeah, I mean, here I come with my political answer again, but when they show that they're ready. I don't know if you want me to put a date on it. I don't know if you want me to put a date on it or not. I mean, I can. October 17th at 5:30 p.m. is when you hand them the keys to the train and they take off running with it. But truthfully, it is whenever they show that they're capable of doing it, because you don't want to put that on their shoulders on August 31st. But in the same spirit, you don't want to put a deadline on it, because if they're ready before, then you hand them the keys earlier. That's how I look at it.
2 things. Wonderful job of Trevor not breaking during that segment. Vince and I were trying hard to get Trevor to break, right? And that's his welcome to doing a show with Vince and Angela just texted me, I'm not a chicken. She must have heard me doing that upstairs. But great job not breaking. But point 2 is, you're correct. It's when they're ready. But here's the thing. It's your job to make sure that they get ready by August 31st, because to our point, you're not going to win the Heisman. But here's the thing. You can't guarantee that they won't get the ball with a minute 30 and no timeouts where they got to then go make some plays. You can't guarantee that, and you got to do your job to get them ready. And that's something that Marcus Freeman talked a lot in our interview Trev, with him, the media's interview, but then also in the post-spring interview, he said it again, talking to Joel Klatt the other day, which, by the way, was a really good Trev, you put the video up on irishbreakdown.com. It was really well done by Joel Klatt as well, and some great answers by Marcus. I like the part where he's talking about Georgia. Just make sure it's clear. You said
yeah, that was great.
Beat him in the trenches. I didn't say that.
That was great. But if we accept your premise,
he absolutely has a lot of respect for the program that Kirby Smart has on the field. That was very clear, and I thought that was it. But interesting. But anyway, you can say all you want. We're going to protect them. We're not. But you can't. If you get to the point where there's a minute and a half left and you got no timeouts and you need a touchdown to win the game, you got to step up and make those plays. That's the reality, Trev. So, like, to your point, you got to put them in enough situations in fall camp to sort of force that issue a little bit to a degree and see who steps up and who answers that bell. And one of the things that I think could be a separator in this is, boy, these guys in team and 7-on-7, they're very close. But you know what? When we did 2-minute stuff, when we did, these type of things, when we got into the scrimmage settings, this guy just consistently, like, I'll just use an example. So everybody knows I'm a CJ guy, but CJ's great in 7-on-7, and he's great in just a normal 1st and 10 team situations and all that kind of stuff. And he looks great in 1-on-1s. He's just putting the ball on money. But every time we go 2-minute and every time we go to a scrimmage, Kenny outplays him. That's got to matter a lot, or vice versa, right? It could be that Kenny does well in these other settings, and when they go to team and 2-minute and those type of things, the more high stakes, the more high pressure, because there's a difference in a Tuesday team period and a Saturday scrimmage. There's just, as a player, there's just more pressure on you because or at least you think that this is going to be like, a good Tuesday practice is worth 3 points, a good scrimmage is worth 10 in the thing. And a team period's worth 5 points, but going down and scoring in 2-minute is worth 15 points in some sort of scoring system. It's in your head, that pressure's ramped up. But that stuff matters. But that's how you find out who's really ready for that moment, because you can say all you want, Trev, and I can say all I want about just get the ball where it needs to go to. We're not asking you to go win us a championship on August 31st. But you know what? You could find yourself where you're down 6 points with a minute and a half left, and you got no timeouts, and you're at your own 12. And it's like, well, I was just kidding. We need you to go win us one. You know what I mean? But even then, though, Trev, it's still get the ball to the open guy. Read the defense and get the ball to your guys. Trust that your guy is going to go make a play. But it's a high-pressure situation. It's a much more high-pack situation. So it's a great answer, Trev. But it's like you hope that they've proven enough in fall camp to where they're ready for that moment when it comes. That's what you hope happens.
Yeah, I think, I'll go kind of a little bit of a different route. I completely agree, number one, that if you need whoever the quarterback is to go down on a game-winning drive against Miami or A&M, they got to do it. And you got to trust that they can do it, right? I think you're going to see more quarterback-driven offense starting after the A&M game. So like kind of that Purdue, Arkansas, Boise, NC State stretch. You got a bunch of home games outside of Arkansas, right? Purdue, Boise, NC State, Southern Cal, those are all at home. And I think you're going to see an opportunity for this offense to really start to grow and kind of take those next steps. And again, I do think whoever the quarterback is going to be able to operate the offense and take the offense down the field and do all of those things against Miami and A&M. I do think that. And I think Marcus Freeman is not going to be afraid to take some chances. Same with, Mike Denbrock and all of those things. I think all of those things are true. But I think you're just going to start seeing the quarterback be more of a part of the offense, more of a quarterback-driven part of the offense in games 3, 4, 5, 6 as they start to move forward, and that'll grow as they grow.
Do you guys have, Vincent, to your point, I'm going to kick it right back to you. Do you have let me think of how to ask this question. Do you have I'm trying to think of like some of the military movies I watch. And actually, it's a great one is you ever see Hidden Figures?
Yeah.
Phenomenal movie if you haven't seen it. It's based on a true story.
Yeah.
With
NASA and the whole,
yes,
right? That's what you're talking about. Okay.
Great movie,
Yes.
by the way.
Agreed.
And stays relatively good to the actual
facts.
story.
Yeah.
But there's a point they're talking about what's the go, no go point, right? Like, is there a point in the season where you look and say, I want to know by this point that this guy is ready to play it away, that he can start to become more of that, Vince, where he can become more of the reason you're winning? Like, is there a point? Because I felt like you need that, because you can say whatever you want about Everett was, Everett was just riding. You know what? Everett wasn't riding the, he wasn't a passenger when the play after Oklahoma tied at 13-13 on the road in Norman.
Right.
It play action bomb to Chris Brown is not, you're a backseat driver. No, you're now driving the bus, brother.
Right.
We need you to drive the bus now. When is that point where you say, okay, I want to see it by then to make me think that this is the time where, it's going to be that.
I get it. I think there's going to be some pieces in the Miami and the Texas A&M game where you're going to see some of that. I do. I don't know if it's going to be a full game's worth. To your point about Everett Golson and the big throw that he made against Oklahoma in 2012, it wasn't the whole game, but man, that was a big moment. I think you could see some moments in Miami and A&M, and then you have the opportunity. And not only that, but you have a bye week in between those two games, which I think could end up being very beneficial. So that's number one. Number two, the way the schedule sets up, obviously you've got 2 tough games in a row. Then you've got Purdue, and we're going to talk about Purdue a little bit later. But I think you'll have some opportunities in those 2 games to see who your quarterback, see who he is when it matters. And then I think you build on that. It's like, okay, we got Purdue coming up. It's at home. Let's get out there and let's kind of extend some things here a little bit. Let's put some more pressure on the quarterback. Let's do some different things in a scenario where you're going to have some more success, right? And see how he handles that and see where that goes. And then you're going to go on the road in an SEC environment to Arkansas. Okay, let's build off of what we just did against Purdue, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're going to have some moments in the first 2 games. But I like where that Purdue game is, though, too, at home, the opponent, all of those different things where you can really kind of push the boundaries a little bit. And then you kind of take that test drive out on the road against Arkansas. And then you just keep adding to it with that stretch of home games there after Arkansas. Does it make sense? Like, that's kind of how I see this offense maturing and growing along with the quarterback.
What about you, Trev?
Yeah, to Vince's point, I think there's going to be mile markers. There's going to be points in the season where it's like, okay, maybe you start adding a little bit more onto the plate, Let's just call a spade here. If Notre Dame wanted to beat Purdue in South Bend on September 20th, they could just hand the ball off to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price 60 times. And look.
Why are you throwing shit on the team? We're about to preview Purdue. We got to say nice things about them a little bit.
Okay,
bro, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and but from a coaching standpoint, you'd have to sit back and think, okay, what does that show us? What does that show us as a staff to get our young quarterback ready? So I'm on the train that Vince is on of you're going to see some mile markers as the season goes on. If I had to kind of put a game on it, or if I had to kind of put a point in the season, I would say by NC State, the staff should feel some level of comfortability saying, hey, this is going to be a game where we're just going to kind of let CJ or Kenny go out and dictate kind of the pace of the game here. This is going to be, something where we kind of open up the offense a little bit. You will see spurts of it as the season goes on, but NC State, I believe, is going to be a quality opponent. It's a game where a lot of people view it as the potential trap game. That might be the one where it's not hey, we're going to come out, first plays inside zone, second play, we're going screen to the right to Jordan Faison, see what we get there. It might be one of those, hey, we're going to open up and take a shot on play 1. We're going to kind of open the doors on this thing. So that's
I would
what I see.
honestly do that against Miami.
Same.
Seriously.
Literally same.
Just if they're in cover 2, okay, but like if they come out in like cover 1 or cover 3, it's like, dude, we're coming back and we're going to take a shot. Just see. The situation matters. If you're at your own 5, it's like, okay, guys, we've got our coming out game plan. But even then, it's like, okay, well, now they're really not expecting
Hey,
it.
listen, man.
I'll just say this. It's kind of like, could you imagine if if the starting quarterback comes out in the first play of the season, he throws a bomb for like a 50-yard touchdown or something like that? Like, oh, crap, there's no containing the hype now for this guy, you know? But to your point, for me, there's obviously you want to see how they mentally handle the first two games. I don't care about how they play. I think the first two games are huge gauges for me to know if this is going to be the guy. Not so much by the performance, but by how they mentally handle it and then how they bounce back. You know, if the starter struggles a little bit at Miami, which is possible and reasonable to think that it's a legitimate option, how does he then play at Arkansas? And how does he handle that crowd? There's two kind of, because I'm looking at it, okay, is this guy going to be ready by round one of the postseason? Or hope now for potentially for Notre Dame, the quarterfinals of the, you know, since Notre Dame can get a bye now. But how does he handle that moment? And there's really two gauges for me. I think NC State was a good one. I'm going to go 1 week later just because of the pressure on that USC game. And it is the rival, and if USC is maybe better than expected, and I hope they are, and I think they have a shot to be better than maybe some people think. I really do. And you know, we'll talk more about that when we get to the USC preview in a little bit later in the summer. But like, we'll see. But anyway, that game's going to matter a lot to me. And then the other big game for me is going to be the at-Pitt game. And the reason I say it's the at-Pitt game, because that might be the fastest front seven Notre Dame's going to play all year. With all due respect to Miami and Texas A&M and USC and NC State. I don't know that there's a linebacker room in the country that runs like that group. And Pat Narduzzi's notoriously, Randy Bates, I believe, is his D coordinator now. They run a lot of stuff at you. Now, if they don't hit, you can rip them up. But if it gets in your head, Vince, you and I have seen a lot of quarterbacks play against Pitt where it's like he's in their head. Narduzzi and they're in his head. And that Pitt team can run around and fly around. It's going to be cold. It's going to be loud probably. It's especially if Pitt's good by then. You've got another highly ranked quarterback on the other side. You've got a linebacking core that's going to come at you all day. And Pitt's going to basically say, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us throwing the ball down the field. And that's the game that says, okay, if you can perform on that stage, I'm like, all right, cool, he's ready to go. Because nothing truly prepares you for a quarterfinal matchup against Bama or a semifinal matchup against Bama. But it's about those next best regular season options, your rivalry game, and then that late season at November Pitt game. If you're still showing some of the same mental concerns that you had against Miami in week one, then I'm a little concerned. And I don't think BC is the same kind of test. It's a different environment. It's a different defense. It's a good defense, but a different defense. I think that Pitt game is my second sort of, that's when I'll have a much better idea if this kid's got it for this season. Doesn't mean that it's going to define their career. It's about this year. Are they ready to really do what they need to do in the postseason this year? Because let's be real, guys, there's some teams Notre Dame's going to play in the postseason that will say, we're good enough to take away your run game if that's all you got. We are. You're going to have to beat us another way. And can Notre Dame do that? That's going to be a question.
So there's a lot of pieces, obviously, to this and what the quarterback needs to be to this team and all of those things. And I think that, you know, they're going to have a lot to prove. Whoever the starting quarterback is, they're going to have a lot to prove, you know, on the team, what this team is going to do, all of these different things. And the bottom line is, whoever it is, they're young, they're inexperienced, they're going on the road to Miami, they're welcoming in Texas A&M technically week 3, game 2. You know, they're going to have to grow up fast. Whoever it is, they're going to have to grow up fast, because if they don't, we've talked about the hook, we've talked about what this offense could be, what it should be, all of those different things. Trevor, if the quarterback doesn't grow up fast, this team can be in some trouble.
It's going to look somewhat like it looked like last season. You know, I've said it a few times this offseason. Bryan said it a lot of times this offseason. The passing game for Notre Dame needs to be more of I don't want to say the focal point, because they are still going to be a team that's generated really led through the trenches and then establishing the run. Marcus Freeman's been very open about saying we need to be able to run the ball and stop the run. That identity is going to remain true. But the passing game has to be a legitimate option early in the game. It can't be all right, well, we're at the point now where if we don't pass, we're just going to lose. Don't wait until the second half, midway through the third quarter, to turn on the passing game. It needs to be an integral part of the offense consistently throughout the season. And that's what a quick maturation of this starting quarterback room is going to look like. This is going to, spoiler alert, feed into what my bold prediction is going to be at the end of this segment. But there's this idea that Notre Dame's offense is just going to be like, you know what, we're just going to ask whoever starts, whether it's CJ or Kenny, just, maybe dink and dunk a little bit, maybe take a few shots. If it works, cool. But Notre Dame's going to run the ball 40-plus times in the first 2 games because they got Miami and then they host Texas A&M. You're going to have to be able to push the ball down the field because I guarantee you Mario Cristobal and Mike Elko are sitting in their office, and when they think about that Notre Dame game, it's going to be we cannot let number 4 and we cannot let number 24 beat us, because if we do, that is a disservice to this football team because everybody knows that Notre Dame is going to try to run the football. The passing game has to become a more integral part of this offense consistently on a week-to-week basis, and not in a 2023 fashion where it's like, all right, gents, we got Tennessee State and Central Michigan. Time to light it up in the air. It has to be week over week over week, especially in the big moments.
Because Notre Dame's worst opponents this year are Power 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they played 10 Power 4 games. The 2 Group of 5 teams they play went 10-3 and beat Oklahoma in a bowl game last year, and went 12-2 and made the playoffs. And that Heisman Trophy runner-up, he's not back, but these aren't, like you said,
Boise
Trev,
State, like, they're on track to be a Power 4 team here in the next year.
Right,
next
they're going to join the Pac-5. Well, Power 5, it would kind of, I guess, if you want to call it a Power 5. But yeah, but to your point, they play like one.
Right.
They've been a Power 5 caliber team for a long time. And, so, like, they've beaten Oregon, they've beaten Washington, they've beaten Oklahoma. Didn't they beat Georgia one of those years? Like, I thought they beat Georgia the first year and then lost to Georgia the second time. They beat Virginia Tech. I'm going to look that up real quick. But the point is Trev is absolutely spot on, because there's I love that. Yeah, they did beat Georgia. I was correct. In 2005, they beat Georgia, 2011, they beat Georgia 35-21. But the point is, you're correct. They're not just going to go out there and say, okay, we're going to ask you to throw the ball 12 times a game. Like, Mike Denbrock wants, part of the reason that they wanted to make this move is because this move is going to lead to them being a more balanced offense. If you wanted to be a run-heavy offense again, they should have paid however much it cost to go get John Mateer out of the portal, who's a very talented quarterback, but he's a dynamic run-throw guy. If that's what you wanted to be, then you should have gone and got him in the portal, or someone like him in the portal. The whole reason that Kenny and CJ are in this battle is because they believe they are the keys to being a more balanced team. Now, does that mean you're going to ask them to throw for 350 yards a game? Of course not. But this is not going to be, and maybe they do that as much as they can in the first month. But when you play Miami, A&M, and Arkansas, and Boise in your first 5 games, you just aren't going to be able to go out there and Penn State this thing. Michigan, Penn State this thing, where you're just going to not throw the ball in the second half because you're not facing James Franklin. So you're facing coaches that know how to handle those big game situations. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But you're going to need them to be balanced if you want Jeremiah Love in the run game to be that. Because last year, you say, well, didn't they do that last year? Yeah, but you had a quarterback that provided an extra weapon in the run game that you don't have now. Where last year in the run game, you had to account for all 11 players in the run game. That won't be the case this year like that. And so you're going to need those guys to, hey, this team wants to load the box. We need you to pull that RPO and bang that glance route for a big play, or take that shot for a big play, and be more balanced. And over the course of the year, it's going to have to get to that point in time. If this team because if we're going to accept that, Trevor, that this is just a team where it's like, don't lose us any games. That's all your job is. Don't lose us any games. Well, guess what? That's the philosophy that will get you beat by somebody. Because you will play that one game for whatever reason where your just offensive line is just not there that day, or your running backs are just not playing well that day, or that team's so committed to stopping your run and they have the resources to do that they can shut you down. What do you do then? And that's not who Mike Denbrock wants to be. he doesn't want to air it out 50 times a game either. He wants balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he was very adamant, and I've been told this by sources, he was very adamant that the quarterback he wanted to lead this team was already in the room at the end of the season. He didn't know who, but I was adamant that Mike Denbrock was one of the people driving the decision to say, I don't care about portal quarterbacks. These guys can go win us some games. Whoever wins it of this group of guys, that's going to be our guy. Now, do I believe that Mike Denbrock viewed Kenny and CJ as hopefully they are the ones that emerge? Yes, I do think that to be true. But he has a lot of faith in these quarterbacks, and not so he can go out there and just hand the ball off 50 times a game. It's just you got to be smart about getting to that point in time is the big part of it.
So to your point, Bryan, and just to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, you know, they want to be more balanced, right? Notre Dame was a run-first football team last year. Everybody in the country knew it, and they still couldn't stop it. But they want to be more balanced. Mike Denbrock wants to be more balanced. I'm sure Marcus Freeman wants to be more balanced, even though he wants to be, you know, a line-centered team and all of those things. You can still be balanced and be a line-centered team. So this offense, you know, the passing game needs to be more of a complement to the run game. And you need to be able to throw the ball when you want to, not just when you have to. And the quarterback, you know, needs to show up in big games, right? It can't just be turn and hand the ball to 4 or 24 and follow behind a Joe Moore Award potential winning offensive line. Like, you have to be able to do some different things. So are Kenny and CJ in line to be able to make that happen for this offense, Bryan?
Man, let me ask you guys a question to answer that. I'm going to ask her a question as well. When was the last time Notre Dame played in a big game? Like a big game, not like a top 25 Pitt team on the road, but like a big game. Georgia, Penn State, a great USC team, the couple times they've played them, Bama, where Notre Dame came out and looked legit throwing the football. I'd say the only time that I can remember is the Clemson regular season game in 2020. Early and late, Ian had some big throws. Outside of that, I can't name you a lot of times. And I, with all due respect to Oklahoma State, I don't view the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State as one of those examples. I just don't. Jack played great in that game. You know, he threw the ball great at Florida State that year. That was a 5-7 football team. Like, it's that's what's been their undoing in a lot of those seasons is they didn't have a quarterback that could kind of step up and say, okay, you want to take this away. I think to the Clemson game in 2018. Vince, we've talked about this a million times. Clemson realized early in the game, if you go back and watch that game, Notre Dame was getting a push on that D-line. I think it was the first or second run, maybe second or third run of the game, where Dexter just runs, I think, inside zone, and he runs into the line, and the line literally just carries him for 10 yards against Clemson's D-line. You guys remember that? They were getting a push. I think Dexter was like efficient on like something like 6 of his first 9 runs in that game, something like that. But Clemson realized very early 12's not going to throw the ball down the field. He's just not. They knew that Miles Boykin had beaten A.J. Terrell for what should have been a big play, if not a touchdown. They saw Michael Young early getting open for a big play. They saw Chase Claypool getting open for a big play, and the ball didn't come any of those times. By the end of the first quarter, Clemson was like, they're not going to throw the ball down. He's not going to throw the ball down the field. And they just loaded the box and shut down the run, and there was not a dang thing Notre Dame could do about it. That's been Notre Dame's story for a long time. And if they're going to truly get over the hump, that's got to change. I think that Kenny and CJ have the talent to either one, at both, be that type of player, Vince. The question is, will they be that this year? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Will they be that this year? That's going to determine, however, whether or not this team has a chance to compete for a championship or whether they're a quarterfinal, semifinal team, and then they're done. But if this team really wants to win a championship, they're going to have some games where that guy steps up and says, okay, this is a different Notre Dame. Because last year, it was a different Notre Dame from a talent standpoint, but as far as how they played, it's the same old Notre Dame. Run the ball, play really good defense, don't have the athletes on the perimeter on offense or the quarterback from a throwing standpoint to beat the best teams in your schedule. Week after week after week. You beat some, but that's because those teams couldn't throw the ball that well either. I mean, think about it. Like, if Georgia if Georgia, like, let's just say that we assume that the Georgia fans are correct about the impact Carson Beck would have had in that game. Notre Dame would have been in trouble in that game, guys. Now, I don't believe he would have, but let's just say that Carson Beck looked like Will Howard did against them. Or let's say Drew Aller did. Notre Dame loses both of those games because they were not going to be able to stay in a shootout with those teams because they weren't good enough throwing the football last year to do that. That's been true a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to win some game where your defense isn't bringing it. It's the same story we've said for years. And to do that, yes, you have to be able to run the ball, but you got to be able to make some plays in the pass game. The receiving core is there, in my opinion, to at least be good enough to say, we got some weapons we can work with, but can the quarterbacks be good enough, Vince? I don't have an answer for you, but that's what's needed.
Yeah.
That's what's needed if a team is going to make a run. It doesn't have to be week after week after week after week. Sometimes it just may be a series, a 2-minute drive, hey, we need you to come out early in the first quarter and make some plays in the throwing game because then that's going to bounce them off. And then it's like, you remember the 17 USC game? Brandon went 9 of 19 in that game, but most of the big completions he hit were on the first 3 drives. Remember, they went 3 and out, and then what was it? They threw a screen where Adams was wide open. I think Josh dropped it. You remember that? But then the next 2 drives, he makes a couple throws. He hits the go ball. He hits the post route for a touchdown to EQ. Then he hits the back shoulder for a touchdown to Kevin Stepherson. And USC's like, what do we do now? You could see it in the faces of the USC players, like, we have no chance in this game because we knew they could run on us, but now they're throwing the ball over our head. We have no chance in this game. And USC was shook. They quit when it was 14-0. The defense, you could see it because they're like, now we can't even stop the passing game. But when Notre Dame can be that team, even for just like, my point is, Brandon only did that for the first quarter. He only completed 9 passes in that game. I think it went like 9 of 20. But we all remember those big throws where it just completely took USC out of their game plan. It may just be that. It just may be a good first quarter that gets that team out of what they're trying to do. It may be a whole game, but there's going to be stretches this season, if this team is going to play for a championship, where the quarterback is going to have to say, okay, now I have to put you on my shoulders and I'm capable of it. You're just not asking them to do it week after week after week like they needed Riley to do. But there will be times. Hopefully it's not in the first 2 games. But if it is, trial by fire, baby. We're going to see what you're made of right away. I mean, you really are. You're going to see what you're made of right away. But that's the thing, Vince, is, when you look at this part of our outline, it's like, this is what's needed. To your point, Vince, the talent is there. But now to pull what Trevor says, I just got to see it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about it, Vince, because they do have the talent. And it's not an underachiever, hope he's able. Like, if they just play to their potential of where they are. So again, not senior year potential, but just play your best, like somewhere in the region of your best football this year. What has me so excited is that these are different quarterbacks than what Notre Dame's had in the past. And there's a shot that Kenny Minchey doesn't win this job. And I've said this several times to you guys privately. I don't know if I've said it publicly, but there's a lot of years over the last decade that if junior version of Kenny Minchey is on that team, he's the starting quarterback. A lot of teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be this year, but that says a lot about the room. There's a shot that CJ Carr may not win the starting job. And I think he will, but if he doesn't, you know what that means? Do you guys know what that means? If CJ's not starting, it means Kenny outplayed him. Do you know how good you have to be at quarterback to outplay CJ Carr? So that's where my excitement level comes down to the season. And that's why I wanted to start here, guys, is because, and I think the next question that you'll ask, Vince, is what constitutes a successful season for the quarterbacks. But part of my reason I'm excited about it is because we just haven't seen a quarterback room with this kind of arm talent in a long time. Physical tools, yes. The 2014, 2015 rooms had great athletes with big arms, but that's not arm talent. This is a different type of arm talent than that room where you had a bunch of bazookas in that room, but guys that were trying to figure it out. Deshaun, could you read a defense? Malik, could you be accurate? Brandon was still learning. These are guys that if they have the talent to go out there against anybody and say, I'm going to carve you up all day. Like, that's just, I'm sorry to do it to you, but it's going to happen. That's the kind of arm talent these guys have, both of them. who steps up and says, this is mine, and follow me. Like, one of them has to do that, and I think one will. And whoever does, I'm excited. Like, again, I've predicted CJ is going to win the job, but I have no problem being fired up about a Kenny Minchey-led football team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because he's also incredibly talented, and for him to play to a level to beat CJ out, barring injury,
that's the thing, yeah.
It's like, dude, that means we're getting peak Kenny, and Pete Kenny's going to be really good.
Right.
And for CJ to then beat out Kenny means he's further along than your typical redshirt freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has me excited and why I'm more confident than maybe I should be based on the lack of experience in this room, is because the both of them are there. Because whoever wins that job is going to have to play pretty darn good football and face a lot of pressure every single day, because you have to compete against the other guy every single day. You're going to be looking forward to seeing somebody with different colored jerseys on. And you got to face this defense every day in practice. Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on these quarterbacks and a lot to show at them. With all due respect to Miami, when you get to the first game of the year, that will not be the fastest defense you've played all year.
Not even close.
Because it'll be what you faced in practice every day.
Correct.
And that's why I feel more confident that these guys are going to be able to step up and say, hey, whoever wins that job, he's going to have a chance to do a lot of fun stuff with his football team this year.
Okay, Trevor, I want to kind of couple the last two things together because they're very similar, right? So, we want to talk about, as Bryan just mentioned, we want to talk about what constitutes a successful season for this position group, for this quarterback group. But I also want you to throw in your bold predictions as well. So, like, what's success, and then what is a bold prediction or multiple bold predictions? We like multiple around here. Where do you see this quarterback room going? What is success, and what is a bold prediction for you from this group?
Yeah, absolutely. Take overall team success out of it and just look at it through the lens of these quarterbacks specifically. Because there's some years where quarterbacks can just ride by just being a passenger, and the talent on the team is good enough to where you're going to make it back to the quarterfinals of the playoffs. You're going to make it to the semifinals of the playoffs. We've seen that before, where the quarterback just kind of has maybe one or two moments throughout a season, but they're kind of the same guy they were in week one that they were in the postseason. But the talent on the roster just gets the overall team where they're expected to go. So quarterbacks specifically continue to evolve, because the one thing that we don't know about them is how they're going to be in game situations. Truly, you can try to simulate it in practice and you can put them in high pressure situations as close as you can. But until you get down to Miami on August 31st, under the lights, crowd screaming, because when you're in that environment, it's different than being inside of the Goog with the speakers pumping in noise. When it's live fans, you're on TV. I want to see them evolve from August 31st to whenever they play in the postseason. Grow as a player. All the things that we just laid out, setting mile markers of, okay, now we can see these guys grow as the weeks progress. That is what a successful season looks like. Because getting back to the origin of this conversation, the reason why we're so excited is Notre Dame is going with whoever it is, CJ or Kenny. They have their guy for the next couple of seasons. That's exciting. But what's going to make this a successful season in my eyes is one of those two guys growing. Now, to your point about coupling this, my bold prediction is I don't think we're going to have to wait long to see it. I think sometime in between the Miami and Texas A&M game, we as fans, we as analysts, we're going to come on here between one of those two postgame shows and go, yeah, okay, they got their guy. And I'm not saying because of a play or because of a series. I think between one of those two games, I think one of those quarterbacks is going to light it up. Truly. Because, like I said earlier, Mario Cristobal and Mike Elko are not going to go out there and be like, okay, game plan today is we can't let 13 or 8 beat us. It's going to be we cannot let Notre Dame run for 250 yards on us, because then we truly have no shot. I think between one of those two games, one of those quarterbacks is going to grow up very quickly and put a lot of fans at ease of, you know what, I know we hadn't seen him play in a game before, but I think Notre Dame has their guy. I think we have whoever's going to lead us on to the next postseason run. So numbers behind it, maybe they go out and they throw for over, 240, 250 some odd yards, but it's going to look like, okay, this is somebody that is not stepping into their first or second ever collegiate start.
Bryan, what say you?
I mean, I a lot of what Trevor just said, it goes for me. I don't need to repeat it as far as like the first part of your question. So, I mean, he nailed that. I'll dive into the second part now and just give the my bold prediction. So, a bold prediction for me, and I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with this. I'm actually trying to be bold, but also a bold prediction is silly if it doesn't have some potential truth to it. I just have a lot of confidence in who's going to start a quarterback this year, and this is not a CJ Carr prediction, because this prediction will be true no matter who is there. But I'm predicting a 3,000-yard passing season, regular season, and I think the starting quarterback accounts for 30 touchdowns no later than the first playoff game, if not regular season. 30 total touchdowns, so it could be 26 passing and 4 rushing. But
I like that.
I think because of so much of the focus being on stopping the run game, and because I think this receiving core is a lot more talented than a lot of people realize, I think some of it's just going to be, hey, did you see the starting quarterback that Notre Dame threw for 320 yards and he completed like 1 pass beyond 20 yards or only 2? But it's like he threw that little screen pass to Jordan Faison, who took it for 40. Or, he threw that little swing pass to Jeremiah Love, who went for 60. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be that kind of thing. So I think there'll be times where he just carves the defense up. But I'm going 3,030 is my bold prediction for regular season for yards, and then 30 no later than the first playoff game. But I think it's possible, because that's not even. I mean, if he averages 3 touchdowns a game, that's 39 touchdowns. So he could, he has to only really average 2 a game, and then half your games you get a third. That's it. That gets you to 30. So that's where I'm at. I feel good about that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in line with where you're at, Bryan. Again, I agree with what Trevor said. You need to see growth from the quarterbacks. That will show me success, because this team's going to win a lot of football games.
Yeah, and when we need you to make plays, you got to make those plays. That's
100%.
also part of success.
Yeah. So I'm good with that part of it. From a bold prediction standpoint, you and I are very similar, Bryan. I think that whoever the quarterback is going to be, and this is bold, but I think they have the opportunity to garner a top 5 all-time single season yardage number. Now,
for the quarterback.
Now,
just so I'm clear, that includes the whole season, right?
Yes, the whole season.
Okay. It's like 15, 16 games.
Because, I mean, they have more games to do it, obviously. Yeah. Now, what does that look like from a number standpoint? Right now, Tommy Rees sits in the number 5 spot at 3,257 yards in 2013. Okay? So, to your point, Bryan, you said 3,000 plus. That would be top 8, because Ian Book sits in the 8th slot at 3,034 yards in 2019. So I'm saying 3,200 and above. That gets him into the top 5. I think that's I think it's bold, obviously, but I think it's also possible. And then, if and when that happens, I think Notre Dame will have a 1,000-yard receiver and an 800-yard receiver.
Ooh, okay. Hey, man, we'll do the receiver predictions here in a couple weeks. Okay,
it's part of the passing game. Okay,
you still could have held it. I'm just kidding.
People won't remember. They don't remember what I say.
To your point, Vince, if CJ Carr gets to 3,000, or Kenny Minchey at the end of the regular season, that's 250 yards a game. So if they play one playoff game and only keep that average, that's 3,250. That's only 7 yards behind the number 5 spot of Tommy Rees. That's if they're at 3,250 on the dot.
Right. On average.
If you add another playoff game and they average 250 yards a game, that gets them right there to third. They only have to play 14 games to get to third. So that is certainly doable. If for some reason Notre Dame doesn't get a first round bye, and the starting quarterback ends the season at 250 yards a game, that's 4,000 yards. That's the record. Now, Brady did that in 12 games.
Correct.
So that's why I say these records need to have asterisks. It's like,
right, because they're playing
of
way more
course,
games.
So-and-so won more games. He started more games.
Right.
If Tony Rice would have been a 3-year starter at Notre Dame, his win record would have been way more than it was. And they also only played sometimes, I think his year they won the title, they won it all, went undefeated, played 12 games, next year they played 13. But that's still impressive. I don't care how many games they played. That's still impressive. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't expect the 250 average to continue in the postseason necessarily, but it's certainly possible. But that's where I'm at. And part of it's going to be how good the quarterbacks are, but part of it is it's faith in the unit around them.
Absolutely.
And then also faith in Mike Denbrock's system. I mean, it's not unheard of for us to see those kind of, that kind of production, and including from young players. I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser started in college, what? 11 games at Notre Dame, started 11 and came off the bench for like a second half of another game, correct? And he threw for almost 2,900 yards in 2015. Mm-hmm. Didn't play at all against Texas and only threw for 92 yards in the game against Virginia where he came off the bench. So if you just look at what he did as a starter, he passed for 2,792 yards in 11 games. That's 253.8 yards per game. That's a Mike Denbrock-led offense at Notre Dame with a redshirt freshman who played.
It wasn't even supposed to be the starter.
Right. Didn't play a snap the year before.
Right.
And in the spring game was so bad that he thought about not playing football anymore.
I will never forget that spring game. Like that was tragic.
I didn't care about it. I've said all offseason, I don't care about the spring game, but it shook him to that point. Sure. I mean, it just did. So, we've seen the last offense he had at Cincinnati with Desmond Ridder. They averaged 238.1 yards per game with Desmond Ridder, who I've never thought much of as a passing quarterback, even that season. So this is not an abnormal thing for Mike Denbrock to do when you look at even at Notre Dame with an inexperienced quarterback. So I don't know. I don't think it's a crazy bold prediction, but it's still a lot, especially when you consider the running back options that they're going to have this season.
Absolutely. And bold is bold, right? But here's the other thing though, Notre Dame hasn't had a player get into the top 10 in a while. I mean, Jack Cohn's 7th, for a season in 2021. That was the last time that Notre Dame had a 3,000-yard passer, was 2021. And then, before that was 2019 with Ian Book. That's it. So it's been a minute since Notre Dame has had a successful passing game. And I think that, when you break it down numbers-wise, is it bold? There's an argument to be made. But at the same time, it's like, it doesn't happen every year at Notre Dame, at least not recently, And so, these lists are peppered with the Brady Quinns of the world and the Jimmy Clausens of the world, things like that when they were throwing the ball all over the place. Hasn't been the case at Notre Dame in a little bit.
I mean, you look at the top 4. It's Brady Quinn twice, Jimmy Clausen, and Everett Golson.
Right.
That's some arm talent right there, my friend.
Yes, 100%.
That's some arm talent.
Right.
So, yes.
And then Jimmy's on there again at 6. So, I mean, he's on there twice in the top 6. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's just there's been one, 2.
And then 9 and 10 is 2 years of Deshaun Kaiser, who had a really good arm talent. Ian Book actually had a lot of arm talent. He just didn't always have the reading a defense talent.
Right.
Ian Book could throw the football. I mean, that's one of the biggest misconceptions about Ian Book is that he didn't have a good arm. I've talked about this before, Vince. I remember being down there at the Georgia game. And I think I might have texted you this at the time, but like I'm watching him and Jake Fromm throwing pregame. I'm thinking it's not even close who has a better arm. It's not even close. Then you get to the game and Jake Fromm's just like letting it all hang out. Like, I don't care. I'm going to make this throw. And Ian Books doesn't throw an outside go ball to Deshaun or to Chase Claypool till the fourth quarter.
Right.
Because against in a game where they literally, after the first series of the game, had neither one of their starting cornerbacks in the game. You remember that?
Yep.
Because Tyrone, is it what's Cleveland's first name? I forget his first name, but he was hurt before the game. And then their other cornerback, Eric. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. What was the cornerback they had? It was Eric something that they had. Really good cornerback in Georgia. This is going to bother me. It's just, this is what happens when you get old, Vince. Just things that just don't last as long. What was his name? The cornerback in 2019. Eric Stokes, the other cornerback. And Tyson Campbell was the other one. I said Cleveland. It was Tyson Campbell. 2 high draft picks. Stokes got hurt on the first series. Liam Eichenberg laid him out. You remember that? And he was out. And it wasn't until the fourth quarter that he threw a goal. The only goal ball he really threw outside was the one to Lawrence Keys, which was a great ball, by the way. He just wouldn't do it again. And so it's like those are the frustrating things that with Ian. But Ian had a good arm. Ian had a processing problem. He didn't have an arm, and he didn't have an elite arm, but it was a good arm.
Right.
I mean, some of the throws you and I would see him make in practice, you're like, dude, I wish he would make more of those in games because that's a dime.
Right.
You know,
he would make them against teams like Navy and Army when there wasn't as much on the line.
Even in big games when they were behind. I mean, the throw to Avery, Avery Davis cooked that dude, but Ian still threw him a dime.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, you think of the post route to Miles Boykin at the end of the Pitt game that was the game winner. Like, that was a great throw. If he makes that same throw on the second drive of the game against Clemson, it's a touchdown, or at least first and goal.
Right.
And that's the thing is I know he can make the throw is a willingness.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think these two kids have the confidence to make those throws. And that's where some of my excitement about this room. And again, this is whoever wins the
Absolutely.
job.
Yeah. 100%.
I have my opinion who I think is going to win it, but I'm not like Team CJ because if Kenny wins it, then let's roll. I've said this before. If CJ wins the job, I'm not going to be surprised. Let's roll. If Kenny wins the job, I may be surprised because of my feeling of CJ, but it's not going to be about, I didn't know if Kenny was good enough to win the job. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is politics. No, dude, whoever wins the job, let's roll, man, because these are two very talented quarterbacks, and I'm ready to see what they can do.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on my bold prediction, only 8 times in the history of Notre Dame football has a quarterback gone over 3,000 yards in a season. So it's still rare air if a quarterback does that, right? And you predicted 3,000, I predicted like 3,200. That's still rare air. So it'll be fun to watch.
I just say
anywhere near
the
that.
last 2 times Mike Denbrock coached an offense at Notre Dame prior to having a quarterback that was a runner, he had a guy that in 16 games on a crap team passed for 29-25, and then he had a guy that passed for 28-84 who didn't make his first start till game 3.
Right. Both in the top 10, by the way.
Right.
So, yeah, both in the top 10 all time at Notre Dame.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. That's going to do it for our quarterback prediction, quarterback breakdown show for the 25 season. Stay tuned because we're going to be breaking down every position group, both offensively and defensively, for the rest of the summer. You will see a trend. It will be you're going to see some offensive on Tuesdays, and you're probably going to see defense on Thursdays. So you're going to see a trend there, but we will get to every position group as we move forward throughout the summer. So make sure you guys check that out. Your favorite position group that you're ready for, listen to them all, because we're going to have them for you every Tuesday and Thursday coming your way. So in the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, all the intel coming out of the weekend from a recruiting standpoint. It was a big weekend for Notre Dame. The only place you're going to get that is at boards.irishbreakdown.com. The premium message board is where you want to be. We're not going to do a show on it. That is going to be reserved for those of you who are part of the IB family in premium message board land, right? All of you are part of the IB family in YouTube land. But if you want the intel, you got to head over to boards.irishbreakdown.com. And, of course, check out irishbreakdown.com as well, because there's all kinds of written content over there that Trevor and Bryan and some of our other contributors put up over there. So you definitely want to check that out at irishbreakdown.com. All right. So our final part of the show is going to be an opponent breakdown. And we are at team number 3 for Notre Dame. And we are going in order of the schedule. If you haven't picked that up so far, we are on the Purdue Boilermakers. And Purdue and Notre Dame are going to square off on September 20th at Notre Dame Stadium. That will be week 3 for Notre Dame, or game number 3 for Notre Dame, and that will be game number 4 for Purdue. And so we're going to talk about the Boilermakers. A lot of changes down in West Lafayette, this offseason, guys, for good reason. It's going to be interesting. So let's just start talking about Purdue, the Purdue Notre Dame. again, the game is September 20th at Notre Dame Stadium. I believe, I want to get the start time correct, 3:30 at home.
Mm-hmm.
So the normal start time for Notre Dame, I say normal, that's kind of the average start time usually. So 3:30 start for that game. We'll see where Notre Dame is at that point. Like I said, in game number 3, guys.
I want to ask you guys a question before we start this.
Okay.
Is there a team in the country serious question, is there a team in college football this year that had more turnover from a coaching staff standpoint and a roster standpoint than Purdue?
Man.
Not whether it was a needed or not, or just whether or not they had one. Can you guys think of a team that has ever been more dramatically changed from one year to the next than this Purdue team?
Off the top of my head, no. I mean, if you compare transfer portal numbers, Stanford doesn't touch them. But in terms of like impact and turnover, things like that, Stanford's probably in the passenger seat of that conversation. But no, the turnover across the board at Purdue has been crazy.
Like, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it. I mean, not even just starters, but like the 2 deep was dramatically overhauled. Like, Trev, I think you had some numbers on it if you want to kind of share those, but like, it's like you look at their entire 2 deep, and it's almost like just off the top of my head, over 80% of their 2 deep is just different than it was last year.
Yep. Not including, this is just transfer portal, not including players who graduated, ran out of eligibility. Purdue lost 20 players between the spring and winter portals that played over 200 snaps last season. 17 of their 22 starters on offense and defense are transfers. Predicted starters for now. I'm looking at our lads. Now, to be fair, you might say, well, Trev, that's just the predicted starting lineup. Well, if you go back further into the 2 deep, there's more. On Purdue's offense in the 2 deep, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically 6 players that were in West Lafayette for the 2024 season that are a part of the 2 deep. I only say technically 6 because Ryan Brown was a part of the 2 deep last season. He transferred to North Carolina in the winter portal, and then he transferred back to Purdue.
For like 5 seconds, he was gone.
In the spring portal. So, and the same could be said for defense. There are 5 players who were in West Lafayette last season in the 2 deep. But out of the, what would that be? 11, 22 players in the 2 deep on defense for Purdue, 17 of them are transfer portal players. And there's an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the 3 deep from the transfer portal. So we aren't being hyperbolic in any way when we say this is a completely new looking football team. Literally on offense, outside of Denylon Morset and Devin Maccabee, the only thing that's consistent from last season to this season is they wear black jerseys and gold helmets. It is a completely different new looking team. It's nuts.
So
it's wild.
Yeah, I just want to touch on real quick the Notre Dame Purdue series, right? So Notre Dame leads the series. They've met 88 times going into this season. So this will be the 89th meeting. Notre Dame leads 58, 26-2. And of course, I think we can all remember the last game against Purdue was last season, and where Notre Dame won 66-7 down in West Lafayette, which by the way, I believe is the biggest defeat in Purdue history, margin of defeat. So
it was at the time.
Yeah. Well, then they lost to IU, right? I forgot about that.
It got broken later in the year.
Gosh, because that was hard to watch.
I can't help but laugh at an opponent, but that was bad.
That was harsh. That was bad.
Trevor, have you
not
put out
harsh
the
for you, but
statistic
like
for this
harsh
show
to
yet?
watch.
No, not this show, but I have it at the hip. I'm ready to go.
Do it right now with how this is.
Yep.
This is why they had to turn over the coaching staff and the team. It was one of the worst teams, my opinion, in college football history.
Yep.
But go ahead and
100%.
share the statistic, Trev, that you've shared before, which is just nuts.
Last season, if Purdue would have started every game, all 12 regular season games, with a 34-point head start, they would be 6-6. of their 6 losses with a 34-point head start, 4 of those losses would still have been by double digits.
You can't make this up.
Literally the craziest. It is the craziest stat that I think that I've heard in quite some time. I mean, it's yeah.
I'll tell you what, Trev. We'll be positive. We will look towards the future for this Purdue team, and they've got a new head coach. So why don't you tell us about the new head coach and his history? His history at his last couple of stops.
Trev was not prepared to talk about someone's history.
Well, I mean,
not what we really cover in this show, Vince.
That's a different podcast.
That's not really how we roll, man. This is a different show. It's a different kind of show, man. I don't even know what that means, but I don't like it. I don't like
doesn't sound good. That's all I know.
We don't do that here.
Well, the previous history of Barry Odom, he was most recently the head coach at UNLV. And if you remember, UNLV was ranked a little bit last season. They were in contention in the Mountain West Conference, and they were battling back and forth in the regular season with Boise State. I'm sure Bryan has more of the numbers kind of off the top of his head from what they were able to do last season. But UNLV, they went on a good run with Barry Odom. And I do like the hire from that Purdue, bringing him in to West Lafayette. Now, I do think the offense is going to look a little bit different this upcoming season for Purdue than what it did for UNLV. Different personnel groupings. We'll get into who their offensive coordinator is here in just a few moments. But he was able to turn around a UNLV program after, I could be misplaced here, but Barry Odom's success at Missouri wasn't all of that. I don't want to call it impressive, but he didn't have the program turnaround that he had for UNLV. Didn't have the same impact.
No, I mean, he took over for Gary Pinkel at Missouri, and they were 2 years removed from, I think, an 11-win season. And he got fired after 4 years because they didn't win. He didn't have success at Missouri. I mean, if you guys remember the Gary Pinkel era, I mean, it was pretty darn good. His last year there, they went 5-7, but before that, like they're a pretty darn good football team in his tenure. And then he goes 4-8 his first year, 7-6, 8-5, 6-6, and then gets fired. And if you guys go back to, like I said, the Gary Pinkel era, the 2 years prior, so Gary Pinkel's last 3 years, he went 5-7 his last year, but the 2 years prior, they went 11-3 and 12-2 and played in the SEC title game. So, like, he was an outstanding coach. And in the 10 years prior to him taking over, Missouri had 6 years in the SEC with over, SEC and 2 years in the SEC and then 3 years in the Big 12, where they were a 10-plus win team and had 2 top 10 finishes. Won the Cotton Bowl twice, won the Citrus Bowl 2 years before Barry Odom took over. So he did not have a lot of success there. But to your point, at UNLV, in his 2 seasons at UNLV, they went 9-5 and 10-3. Well, the year before he got hired, they were 5-7. A year before that, they were 2-10. A year before that, they went 0-6 during COVID. So you're talking about a team that went 7-23 in the 3 years prior, and then he goes 9-5, and then this past year they go 10-3. But what was impressive about their 10-3, Trevor, they had an overtime loss to a 10-win Syracuse team, and then their other 2 losses were to Boise State. Like that's who beat them last year. So you're going to talk about they're not, and they did that with, I think one of the best parts of the coaching job he did was they did that with a quarterback who transferred in and quit the team at the beginning of the year because he wasn't happy with his NIL situation.
Yep.
And he had to maneuver that and still go out there and win, and to keep that team together and have them rally the way they did. It looked to me as though Barry Odom applied some lessons that he learned from his struggles at Missouri into winning at UNLV. Now, the question now is, Vince, you had success at the G5 level. You did not have success at the P5 level. What's it going to be like at Purdue?
Right.
I think the biggest thing for me with Barry Odom is I don't know if it's going to be a good hire or not. But I can tell you one thing. Barry Odom's football team at Purdue will not get punked in the trenches game after game like they did last year. That is the one thing I can guarantee that by the time he leaves Purdue, whether he leaves on his own, Vince, or whether he leaves because he gets fired, they will be a better team along the lines and a much tougher overall football team. And I mean toughness by just they'll compete.
Right.
They won't just get embarrassed physically the way they did last year. And here's the thing. They had two guys that were considered prime portal guys with on the D-line with Will Help going to Clemson, and then Cole Brevard's one of the guys that people are hyping up as a big pickup for Texas. Those were starters for them last year on the D-line. Everybody keeps talking about how good Dylan Theineman was at Purdue, and he's going to Oregon. 3 huge offseason pickups for these. We're on the team that gave up over 60 points like 5-6 times last year.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing.
It's like a good friend of mine in the coaching world says all the time. It's there's a lot of quitting those guys.
And there absolutely was that with them.
And I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I'm saying as a team,
that's a coaching problem.
There's just a lot of quitting that
team.
Your
whole team is that way. It's because they don't have faith. It's not that they're soft or they're punks. It's just there's no faith in the people around them.
Correct.
That like, dude, we just got no chance.
Which is why there was a complete overhaul. Which is why, to your point, there's going to be different accountability, right? And we're not saying the record's going to be any different, and because we'll get to what we think the record might end up being here in a little bit, but there's going to be different, and it is not going to be an overnight situation. This is not going to be an IU situation. And you know what I mean? It's going to be, to me, it's going to be interesting though, because that is their biggest rival, and how do they respond to what IU did? But it's not going to be an overnight thing. But if you're a Purdue fan, you're looking at what IU did, you're like, man, it'd be great to be that.
Here's the difference. He brought a lot of guys from UNLV over with him. The problem is most of the best players at UNLV are gone. They're out of college.
Yeah.
So like 3 starting offensive linemen are likely going to be UNLV transfers. I think only one of them was like a full-time season-to-season starter. Whereas when Curt Cignetti came, most of his players at JMU were young.
Right.
And he brought them over, and they still had eligibility left. They were all conference players.
Right
there. That's not the case here.
Right.
Which is partly also why. I mean, if he brought his whole UNLV team with him, they could win some games. Not like 9 or 10.
Not go to the playoff. Right.
Well, they're probably a 600 team or 600 team, a 6-6 team. I got caught between 500 and 6-6.
No, I got you, man. I was like,
Trev's doing the math. Carry the 1.
Is that 7 and 5?
That's what I was saying. I was like, okay, they're going to win 6.4 games. Okay.
Are we bringing ties back, Brian?
I was like, okay.
I got stuck between 500 and 6-6. So I went 600. But but the point is they're not that. The roster's not that. This is going to be this is going to take some time. Now, they were able to get some big name guys, and the thing I like about what they did, Trev, too, is they brought in a lot of young transfers. One of the dumbest things he could have done as a coach is to try to win right now. Now, there are some veteran transfers. They brought, I think there might be like 3 or 4 on offense, and there might be, maybe 4 or 5 on defense that are guys that are seniors, that some of them have eligibility left, some of them don't. But there's a lot of transfers that are freshman, sophomore eligibility transfers. He brought 2 offensive linemen with him from UNLV that had some starts last year, or played some, that are talented kids, just didn't play a whole ton as freshmen at UNLV, that they may struggle this year in the Big Ten, but wait till 2026 and 2027 when that 6'4", 330-pound kid they've got at guard is able to step up. And, I'm talking about Hank Purvis. Kid's got some ability. He played almost about 100 snaps last year as a true freshman, I believe, at UNLV. He's 6'4", 330. Wait till he gets a little bit older, and all of a sudden maybe he's going to be a good player. So I think that balancing those two things is something that should help them. Is they're not going to have to completely redo it again next year, like get Nitro Tuggle out of the portal. I mean, whether or not that works or not, we'll see. But Nitro's got 3 years left, so like that's what that 3 of the 4 projected starting offensive linemen they got out of the portal have multiple years of eligibility left. Right. So Vince, that's kind of thing that's different about some of the other jobs. And that's what Curt Cignetti did do. That's similar to what he's doing. Is a lot of the portal guys that Cignetti brought over are guys that are coming back this year.
Right.
Which is why I think some people are sleeping on Indiana a little bit. But that's a key that was a smart move by Barrett. You can't just only do underclassmen. You needed some veterans to just have a lineup. but they brought in a lot of young guys. So, like, hopefully Purdue can have some more continuity going into 2026. And then next year they can maybe pick and choose a little bit for some more higher level transfer guys.
All right, so let's jump into some more specifics here. Let's jump into the offensive side of things. Obviously, new coaching staff means a new offensive coordinator in Josh Henson. So what kind of system is Josh Henson going to bring to Purdue, Bryan? And, what's it going to look like? Is this going to look like last year? Is it going to be run heavy? Is it going to be pass heavy? What is Josh Henson bringing to the offense?
Well, the interesting thing, Trev or Vince, is I don't know about the run heavy versus pass heavy thing because he's only ever been a OC from Monday to Friday. He was the OC at USC the last 3 years.
So he's not calling plays, is
right.
What you're saying.
And then the 3 years before that, he was just the O-line coach at Texas A&M. And then, for I think it was 3 years before that, he was the O-line coach at Oklahoma State. So he's primarily been a offensive line coach. And then he was the OC for Lincoln Riley the last 3 years, but it was, help the game plans, and then Lincoln Riley calls the plays. So this will be his first time really calling plays since he was considered the OC at Missouri, but I think he was also a situation where somebody else is calling the plays. So we'll see how that goes. I got to think they're going to try to be more balanced because he is he's an O-line coach. Now he's going to coach the tight ends at Purdue. He is going to be the play caller because Barry Odom's a defensive guy. So he's not calling plays. He was a defensive coordinator for a long time. So he will be the play caller. I got to think he's going to want balance. But a lot of his experience is in air raid type of stuff with Lincoln Riley and, throwing the ball around a little bit with Texas A&M. And then obviously I don't know that I'd call Mike Gundy's offense an air raid, but it's got some air raid. They're cousins.
Some quality.
You know what I mean? Yeah. At the very least during his time at Oklahoma State with Mike Gundy. So there's a lot of that. So probably – spreading the field, a lot of mesh routes, a lot of post-snap switching, a lot of that, a lot of counters and a lot of gap scheme, run game, things like that. I think we'll probably see a lot of that, which, is going to be interesting to see.
So is this going to be, for Purdue fans out there that might be listening to this, is this going to be kind of reminiscent of Joe Tiller?
No.
Okay.
No, because Joe Tiller was, it was basketball on grass. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? It was like you're spreading it, you're throwing the ball 50 times a game.
Right.
I think this is going to be more of a because think about Mike Gundy is Mike Gundy's had some really good quarterbacks and receivers, but the one thing about Mike Gundy's teams when they were good, they ran the ball really well. Probably more along those lines, Vince, than what they saw. Where there's times at Purdue back then they'd go empty for a whole series.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know.
They just let Drew Brees chuck around and whoever.
It'll probably look more like Oklahoma did under Lincoln Riley with a lot of gap scheme, a lot of counters, a lot of wraps, a lot of traps in the run game. But they're still going to throw it. I think part of the reason that you're bringing Ryan Brown back as a quarterback is because he is a bit of a he's a guy that has some running ability to him. I think that's the kind of quarterback they're going to look to, is sort of that dual threat quarterback. And that's kind of some things I expect that you're going to see. Cause Ryan Brown's a guy that can run. He's a good runner. We'll see what kind of passer he is, but he's a guy that can run. Purdue a couple years ago, they would bring him in for that. They would bring him in for the ability to run the football. And so I think I'm going to pull up his numbers real quick and back that up a little bit. But, last year, Ryan Brown for Purdue played in 8 games. He threw 76 passes, but he ran the ball 50 times for 155 yards, so the year before, he ran the ball 21 times for 85 yards, and they would come bring him in and have him do designed runs. Went 12 of 16 passes for 75 yards. So he's not a runner only. He's not a drop back passer. He's a dual threadish type of quarterback for them, which is why they wanted to get him back. So I think it'll look like that.
Okay,
is what they're going to do specifically. We'll see. And I think it's also why, Vince, you saw them in the portal. Look a lot into trying to bring in as many perimeter threats as they could, trying to dip in the portal and bring in a bunch of receivers. They thought, was it like 5 or 6 portal receivers?
I think 6, because there's 5 listed in the thing that I have, but then you also bring in Nitro Tuggle.
I'm looking at this now. Actually, it was 7. When you look at the third string, it was 7.
Okay.
Nitro Tuggle, Charles Ross, Chauncey Magwood, Michael Jackson III, Corey Smith, EJ Horton and David Washington, and two of those kids were from I think from Georgia, or was that CJ Smith kid last year? I think they might have got him last year, but Nitro Tuggle is from Georgia.
Right.
But
Nitro Tuggle's from around here.
Yeah, he's a local kid that Notre Dame didn't pay a lot of attention to during his recruitment. But that's why they're bringing so many receivers, because they are going to run a lot of 11 personnel, spread the field and go with some tempo and run screen game and post snap switch type stuff. And I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff.
Well, two of them left. They brought in Isaiah Myers from Charlotte and Nathan Leacock from Tennessee in the winter portal, and both of those guys left in the spring already, which is why they added more in the spring transfer portal. But they brought in a lot.
Very different looking group, guys. I think the unit that intrigues me, running back should be
it's the one place where they've got a returning starter.
Yeah, and he's okay.
Yeah,
I mean he's okay. Talking about Devin Mockabee, he's okay. I mean he's a good sized back that can do some things. He's 6 foot. He's 205. He runs hard. He's rushed for about 1,500 yards the last 2 years, 10 touchdowns. Decent check down player out of the backfield. He's a good player. They brought a kid in, Malachi Thomas from Virginia Tech, who's run for about over 500 yards the last couple of years. Like, they'll be okay there. The unit I'm really intrigued by is the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unit I'm really intrigued by, because you're bringing in I believe I saw, depending on who you look at, it's a little different, but based on most of what I've seen, there's a good chance that all 5 of their starting offensive linemen are going to be transfers. Joey Tenona, former Notre Dame guys, battling. He played some last year, so he'll be kind of in the mix a little bit there for them. But there's a chance that all 5 of their starters could be portal guys.
Wow.
Well, 3 of those guys played at UNLV together. Now, not for this OC, so it's not like the Indiana thing where they literally brought in an OC and DC from James Madison, so they were playing for the same guy. His DC came in from UNLV, but John Henson, obviously, like I said, came in from USC. But Jalen St. John was a transfer to UNLV, played at Arkansas, played a bunch of snaps last year, was I think, second-team All-Mountain West player last year at UNLV. Big kid with some SEC experience. And then you bring in the other 2 young guys that were UNLV transfers, and that's the expected guards, which is Hank Purvis and I believe Mason Vicari was also from UNLV. Let me just check this one real quick. I believe Mason also came from UNLV. Mason only played 60 snaps last year. Hank Purvis played about 77 snaps last year. They were kind of rotation guys, but they were both freshmen. They're huge. Hank Purvis is 6'6", 330. The Mason Vicari is 6'4", 310. They brought in a tackle from Indiana State that is 6'8", 300 pounds. And then, of course, the kid from Arkansas is 6'5", 325. And if you remember, a lot of those air raid teams, like big offensive linemen that can trap and wrap and just kind of push people off the ball, how quickly can that unit come together? That's going to be the question for Purdue this year. Because honestly, guys, their skill talent doesn't stink on offense. There's some players that can do some things if the line give them time, to where they can at least be maybe a 3 or 4 win team, maybe even a 5-win team because of their offense. Now, their defense is a different story, but we'll get to that in a second. But they've got big size in the offensive line. There's a couple guys that have played a lot of football. Their center transferred in from a Canadian school college, and he was an all-Canada player. Now, I don't know what the heck that means, and I don't know how good he's going to be, but he's a kid that's played football for, what I mean? He's an older kid that's played some football. How quickly can that unit come together? I think that's the biggest question for this team, is if they can just play like big guys and just have some level of, success, then this is going to be a thing where they might be okay on offense as they learn this new system. But the big thing is when you look at their offense, it's about, okay, they got a lot of guys that hopefully can return the next year and maybe next year, but there's some hope for them to have a more competent offense than they had a year ago, because their offense a year ago was, it's just, let's say it was embarrassing. I mean, it was weird, because how do you were so bad in so many games. I mean, you scored a garbage touchdown against Notre Dame on a play that was set up because a safety for Notre Dame tackled 2 DBs on his own team. Like, if you guys remember that, that's how they had that big play against them. Looking at Purdue, they also lost to Ohio State 45-0. They lost to Indiana 66-0. They lost to Oregon 35-0. They lost to Wisconsin 52-6. So if you actually, this is a crazy number. If you look at the combined score against Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana, they lost 212-7 in those games. Like, so yeah, their defense was bad, but they scored 10 points against Nebraska, 6 against Wisconsin, 20 against Northwestern, 10 against Penn State, 17 against Michigan State, and then 49 against Illinois. Like, what happened in that game? And it never showed up again. That was an anomaly. They were putrid on offense last year. I think they at least they were big and they were slow. Like, that was their problem. This year, they'll have better athletes. Like, look, I don't think Nitro Tuggle is what they made him out to be in high school. He's still good football. He's still a talented football player for Purdue. He's now at the level he should have been coming out of high school.
100%.
He can be a good player at Purdue if he can keep his head on straight.
100%. Saw him play in person a few different times against my kid's team. Talented kid. He's not an SEC kid. Like, he just wasn't. And I think Purdue is a great landing spot for him. Great landing spot. So I agree with you.
So there's at least some hope there. You got a veteran offensive coordinator, an O-line centered guy. You're going to have a big O-line. You got some athletes. They should have at least a pulse on offense this year. And then potentially, if some things click, maybe they're decent on offense this year. And then next year, you're starting to say, okay, let's see what Purdue can do. You know, lost some seniors, but you got a lot of guys coming back. Your quarterback comes back. Some of your better receivers come back. Got some offensive linemen come back. Hey, let's go find you a left tackle in the portal. Let's see what you can do.
Yeah.
So at least that side of the ball, they have a shot to be competent. Vince, on the other side of the ball, this is going to be a little tougher, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What say you, Trev?
I was going to say, Trev, you want to take the defense? They got a new coordinator, obviously, and Mike Schur. You know, what do you think things are going to look like on the defensive side of the ball? Because they gave up a lot of points last year.
Yeah, defensively for them, you're almost in a spot where, look, you hope that the production on the field is just a byproduct of establishing a couple things. One, you need some sort of culture and defensive identity on that side of the football, because last season, for all sakes and purposes, they just got pushed around in every single game that they played in, legitimately. And there were even hints about it in the Indiana State game. You know, but at the end of the day, it was Indiana State, so Purdue was able to win that game.
Yeah.
But that's first and foremost. You hope that some of the on-field production is a byproduct of establishing a few things culturally and characteristically on the defensive side. But you mentioned it. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. He came in from UNLV. He followed Barry Odom over. Now, again, we listed off the laundry list of players that they lost on defense, and a lot of their high-octane portal players that they lost were on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Cole Brevard, they lost Will Helt, they lost Dylan Thieneman. So they lost Yanni Karloftis, who's the younger brother of George Karloftis, who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs right now. So they lost a lot of impact players on defense. Like I said in the start of this segment, the only players that they bring back is CJ Madden, who's a defensive end, and Jamarian Harkless, who is an interior defensive lineman. Outside of that, it is a completely new look defense for them. We're talking about a unit that gave up over 60 points, I believe, twice last season. They gave up over 50 points. Let's see.
Two other
times. Yep, two other times. And when they weren't doing that, they gave up 38. They gave up 35, 45, 49. So it's a group that absolutely has its work cut out for them. And then from a talent standpoint, you go through and you look at what they brought in. There are some.
They'll have a 5-star starting on defense. Tony Grimes.
They
He's
will
going
have
like his fourth college, but he was a 5-star.
Yep. He came over from UNLV. I don't mind the production that Manny Powell had, their middle linebacker last year. I like him.
He's a good player.
So he'll be leaned on quite a bit to kind of help pull that defense together. But again, we've talked about it on the show so many times. I get nervous when position groups within a defense are completely made up of starter or from transfer portal guys. we're talking about 9 of the 11 on Purdue's starting defense being made up of transfer portal players. They have their work cut out for them, man.
And I believe only 2 of the expected starters are from UNLV, I believe. So it's not even necessarily a situation where it's a bunch of guys that have played in the defense before. Now, the good thing is they are bringing in some guys that have produced.
Yep.
And produced at a pretty good level. A guy that I'm keeping my eye on is an edge player they got named CJ Nunnally. Now, he played at Akron, who was terrible. But in the last 2 years at Akron, he's had 121 tackles, 26.5 tackles for loss, and 13 sacks in 2 years on a pretty bad defense. So, meaning he wasn't getting a lot of help. He's 6'3", 260. I'm very curious to see what he does. He's a kid that has been kind of all over. He started at the FCS level, went JUCO, and then spent the last 2 years at Akron. He's a player that I'm very interested in. You talk about Manny Powell as a part of a pretty good linebacking core for UNLV last year, had 59 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. He's a guy that can play inside linebacker. He can come off the edge. He's a guy that brings some ability. Tony Grimes, I kind of joked earlier, about what he's done, but Tony Grimes is a guy that was considered a big-time recruit coming out of high school and has played all over the place. He's been at Texas A&M. He's been in North Carolina. He's got athletic ability. I just don't know if he's got the focus or the attitude. He had 20 tackles last year and 6 pass breakups at UNLV last year. So, again, he knows the defense. He will have played in the defense. And, obviously, this coaching staff felt confident enough in his attitude and work ethic and those type of things to bring him over with them from Purdue. They had a kid that's going to play safety for him this year, Crew Wackley, which is one of the most BYU names ever, who transferred in from BYU. He had, over the last 2 years, has had 103 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 7 pass breakups, and 3 interceptions. So, again, are any of these guys big-time players? Richard Toney transferred in from TCU. Didn't play a whole lot at TCU last year, was hurt. But 2 years ago at Nevada, had 67 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a pass breakup, and 2 picks as a safety. So, the good news for them, if there's something you want to hang your hat on, is that they've got a lot of guys who have played a lot of football in defense. It's just they've never played together. And with the exception of 2 guys, they're all learning a new defense. And I don't know how many of them are actually impact players. I have a feeling that it could be a rough start for Purdue. But I think this team by November could be a quality team where you look at their schedule, guys, and I'll pull up their schedule here real quick to kind of look at it, where if they can somewhat stay healthy and the defensive players can kind of figure some things out, you start getting into October, November, maybe they got a shot to upset a Minnesota, Northwestern, or Rutgers. Maybe they got a shot to be competitive against a Michigan. Maybe they got a shot to be, to maybe keep it closer against Indiana. That's what you're hoping about. But here, the worst part about it is their schedule is very brutal at the beginning and at the end.
Yeah.
Their first 2 games, they got a shot to win both of those. And then it's you're not going to win for a month. You're not going to beat USC at home. No. And if they do beat USC, Lincoln Riley's going to get Lane Kiffined.
I was going to say, right on the tarmac.
They're going to accidentally leave him at the airport. You're going to get smacked by Notre Dame. Then you get a bye week. Then you get Illinois. Then you hope that you're at least going enough and learning enough to where now you can be competitive against the Minnesota and Northwestern, Rutgers, and maybe even a Michigan. It's going to be hard, but that's the thing is not only did they starting over, but they play a pretty rough Big Ten schedule at Michigan, at Washington, at Minnesota, home against USC, home against Illinois, home against Ohio State, home against Indiana. You almost would rather it be flipped. You'd almost rather have to play at Ohio State. You'd rather play at Illinois, play at USC, play at Indiana, because you're going to get beat by those teams anyway. So at least play them on the road, and then maybe you can get Minnesota, Northwestern, and Washington, maybe Michigan at home. So it's going to be tough sledding for him in year 1. If they go 4-8 this year, I think that's a good coaching job by Barry Odom.
I think it's a great coaching job by Barry Odom, because I'm looking at this schedule, and I personally, I think I see 7 guaranteed losses. I think I see 2 potential wins in the first 2 games of the season.
They're yep, they're going to win that game. That's it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because look, Southern Illinois is an FCS team. Ball State is a MAC team. And Ball State has a brand new coaching staff as well. So, they're starting from scratch too.
Well, yeah.
So that's a thing. So I see those 2 as wins, right? and I see 7 losses, and I see a couple of toss-ups. And it's those toss-ups that will decide whether the season is a quote-unquote success.
You need to
Purdue.
win at least 2 of those toss-ups and maybe have one upset.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what you need to do. It would be unfair to ask Barry Odom to come into this situation and say, hey, man, take him to a bowl game.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
if he does that.
If Barry Odom takes him to a bowl game, he deserves to be coach of the year. And I'm not joking.
I'm not joking.
Legit. I'm not kidding.
Yes.
Legitimately.
That is a phenomenal. I said that about Deion Sanders in 2023. Remember, I said if Deion takes his team to a bowl game, he should be considered for coach of the year. That's how bad this. And I think Purdue was worse last year than what Colorado was in his last year there. Absolutely. And Colorado wanted to get rid of their players. I mean, imagine what Purdue would be this year if all the guys that left stayed. You know, if Dylan Thieneman came back, if Cole Brevard came back, if Will Help came back, they might actually be okay, but you're starting over from scratch.
I mean, they lost 10 defensive backs in the portal.
Yeah.
Like,
from a secondary, pretty terrible, but at least
agreed. Just even from a numbers standpoint, you know what I mean? You still got to put guys on the roster. You know what I mean? So, So this is going to be an uphill climb for Purdue fans.
It is.
No doubt about it. And it is what it is. It's the lot that you're going to live for a couple of years. And you hope that Coach Odom is there and he's going to slowly build this thing up from the bottom up. And then in a couple of years, you can talk about winning records and you can talk about bowl games and things of that nature. But I completely agree with you. If they go 4-8, that is an absolute success this year. If they go 6-6, it's coach of the year territory.
I think the big thing for Purdue guys, when you talk about expectations, it's just be more competitive. So, I mean, the chat, I think it was Archer said, no, it was Andrew Gilmore said, they could steal a win over Northwestern. Like, they need a couple of those. They need a couple of those games where you steal a win that you didn't think, oh, wow, they went into Minnesota and upset Minnesota, or boy, they got that win, or hey, man, they beat a Rutgers team that's bowl eligible, something like that, But the other thing is, look, you're going to get smacked a little bit by Notre Dame and Ohio State. It's okay.
Right.
But, maybe you take Michigan to where it's a 4-quarter game for a while, or maybe an Indiana game's a little tighter, where even if a team kind of pulls away late, you're competitive. Maybe USC ends up beating you by 17, but for at least a while they're young. That's the thing. I think he needs to change the culture. The biggest challenge he has is not turning over the roster. It's building a culture, because you're not changing the culture, because there is no culture to change. Everybody's gone. It's about
starting from scratch,
creating a culture.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the biggest challenge for Barry Odom is that when in the first month, by the end of the first month of your season, actually by game 5, you've played USC, Notre Dame, and Illinois, but don't get crushed by Illinois this year. They didn't last year, but don't get crushed again. Maybe instead of losing to 66-7 in Notre Dame, you lose, 41-17, and you make a couple plays and it's not as bad as it was last year. So it's just going to be about just being more competitive in these games. I think that's really the big thing for me. And as Andrew pointed out, steal a couple wins that maybe people didn't think that you were going to. And then now all of a sudden you're 4-8, 5-7, and you're feeling like, hey, man, we've got something to show to some of these portal kids and some of these high school recruits that they're trying to get, because they've done a good job of getting some good players on campus. They hosted Mikhail Blade for a visit. Like, this staff is grinding on the trail to get some decent players on campus. But to convince them to come play for you, you're going to have to show that, hey, I'm not going to go there and get my face beat in. That's going to make, like, Coach, man, I love you. I love what you guys are doing. This, that, and the other thing. But I just don't want to go there and get my face beat in.
Yeah, you got to sell them on the future too. And
that's going to be the key.
Yeah,
and if you can just be competitive, even if you don't have a great record, but we went from having the worst season in our history of our program to where, we weren't great, but dude, look, we battled. We played Michigan for 4 quarters. We played Indiana for 4 quarters. We battled Illinois again. We went on the road and won a couple Big Ten games at Illinois. Minnesota and Northwestern, and all of a sudden that's what they got to do. That's the expectation for Purdue. That's how hard they fell the past couple of years. That's what they're going to need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mean this to come off as a snide comment. I'm being legit when I say this. Just be competitive going into the half. I mean, it'd be a great story for them to be competitive at, in the big house in the fourth quarter.
Don't you think, Trev, if it's halftime and they're like, dude, we're in this game, like, don't you think that then bleeds into the second half and now that carries into it? Like that's the point. But like they were out of games almost 75% of their games are over by the end of the halftime. And a bunch of their games were over by the end of the first quarter. The Notre Dame game was over by the end of the first quarter. Like, they were down 42-0 at halftime. Like, Notre Dame ran a draw, basically, to try to run the clock out because they had just thrown – you remember that? They threw a pass down the field to Jaden Greathouse, got caught for big gain, comes back because of a penalty. Is, 30 seconds left, 50 seconds left? And they're just like, all right, it's 1st and 15 or 1st and 20 or whatever. Let's just run an inside zone and run the clock out. Jadarian Price makes a guy miss in the backfield and then gets outside and makes a bunch of dudes miss and 75-yard touchdown. It's like I was literally laughing in the press box when he made that run. Because it was so comical at that point in time.
It was like watching youth football. You know what I mean? Where you get the one kid who's you probably should check his birth certificate, but he's just making everybody miss, and like it was just it's like, wow, guys, come on,
like you're all-American safeties like getting juked in space by everyone and their mother in that game. It's just like it was embarrassing, and they had way too much talent to be that bad.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh yeah,
and now they're starting
alert. It wasn't just the Notre Dame game. Like you're not like the IU game wasn't 10-0 at half, and then IU just kicked it on. Right. I mean, the Wisconsin game wasn't 10-6 at halftime, and then they just turned it on in the second half. It was
from start to finish.
If you can go into halftime and just start to build some sort of culture, look, there's a lot of people that now that IU did what they did and it was spectacular, that is not an expectation for teams making a turnaround. Is go from really, really bad to making the playoffs. Typically, turnarounds take years to happen. Mm-hmm. It's you go from really bad to, hey, we were a competitive 4-8, and then the next season you try to get to 7-8 wins, and then hopefully by the third season, hey, maybe we can put a little something together.
Yeah.
But for Purdue, they got a long road ahead. For me, their floor is 2-10, their ceiling is 5-7.
Yeah, just to give some context, so the Notre Dame game was 42-0 at halftime. Wisconsin was 21-6.
Hey.
Oregon was 21-0. If you guys remember that game, Oregon played horrible in the first half and was up 21-0. Ohio State was up 21-0 at halftime, and Penn State was up 21-3 at halftime, and then scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And then Indiana was up 28-0 at halftime. And Indiana ran the score up. They scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame could have scored over 80 if they wanted to. If they'd have played against Purdue the way Indiana did, where they were purposely running the score up, Notre Dame could have, honestly, I'm not even joking, they could have scored 80, 90 points in that game. It was that bad. Riley Leonard got pulled at halftime, and he had over 200 yards of offense at halftime. And they didn't let C.J. Carr throw a single throw. Like, they could have scored a lot more in that game. Mm-hmm. But that, to your point, guys, like 21-0 is 21-3 is one of your better halftime scores in some of those games. The only game they got really worked where it was actually close at halftime was the ugly Nebraska game. It was 0-0 at halftime. That was a really ugly game. But then they ended up losing 28-10. Right. But, I think that's a great point, Trev. It's just battle. Mm-hmm. Battle. Just be competitive. And I think if they can do that, then that's a step. It's to me, if I'm a Purdue fan, and if you're a Purdue fan watching, it's not about your team's record this year. No, you can't be worse than last year. It's about how does your team compete. Even if they lose by 24, were they out there competing for 4 quarters? We've talked about that with like Tony Elliott's teams at Virginia. Notre Dame was killing Virginia this year. It's 35-0. Those kids never stopped competing. Stopped competing. No. And that's what Barry Odom's team needs to be this year. I don't care if Notre Dame beats you 56-0 again. Play hard. Don't quit. Just compete. Because you can watch film of a beatdown and say, this kid gave me something. This kid showed me something. This kid competed his butt off. Now we got to clean up this. We got to clean up that. But guys, we just played maybe the most talented team in the country. Sure, it looked like the way it looked. But our kids battled their butts off this year. And that's going to be the key for them. That's what they need to do.
Yep. in year one, that's something you can build on. That's something you can sell to your boosters and your fans and
And
your
the record will take care of
all of
itself.
those things.
Right.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And you never know what the schedule is going to be like in the Big Ten the following year, and they may get some layups that they can get some wins. So
Yeah. Well, actually, what's interesting, I do actually think, isn't their schedule for 2026? Didn't the Big Ten release 4 years worth of schedules?
Oh, 4?
They haven't set dates, but they've set opponents.
Okay, gotcha.
So like next year, Vince, they play Wake at home, Indiana at home, Notre Dame at home. They play Maryland at home, Minnesota at home, Washington at home, Wisconsin at home. Then they play at Illinois, at Indiana, at Iowa, at Penn State, at UCLA. So it's not easy, but there's no Ohio State, there's no Oregon, there's no Michigan.
Yeah, that's not
you get
bad.
Penn State, but your home games, Minnesota will be winnable at home. Maryland, if you improve, Maryland could be winnable at home.
Sure.
Wisconsin could be winnable at home.
UCLA,
maybe Washington, although I think Washington is going to be a good team. But maybe you steal one road game and then you get a home win against Wake Forest and then a home win against Indiana, and then now all of a sudden you're like, okay, like now we're in a bowl game. So it's about laying that foundation to where you can maybe get a couple impact transfers the next year that help you win some of those games.
Yeah,
but like, look, man, these kids aren't stupid. There's going to be a kid watching film and be like, Coach, I know you're offering me a decent amount of money, but I watched your team play last year, and I want no part of that action.
Right.
Like the kind of kids you don't want to play for a team like Purdue was last year.
Sure.
If they're like that again. It was different this year because that's not who was recruiting those players.
Correct.
But if they look this year like they did last year, he won't have as much success in the portal as he did this year.
Right.
He's selling, look what we did at UNLV. Next year, you're selling, look what we did at Purdue.
Right.
And that's what I say is kids will look and say, hey, Coach, you know what, man? Like you guys competed. You guys were well coached. You just don't have a lot of talent. I'm talented. I can help you out.
Yeah. They're going to have to really mine for some gritty Indiana, Ohio, Illinois. Like they're going to find some gritty kids to just kind of build the foundation. And then once they start getting a couple W's in there, and then they can honestly, get a little more.
I would raid the MAC and Conference USA for every good player they have.
Absolutely.
Like they did with the Donnelly kid on the edge.
That's the system that we've got right now.
Tackles for loss and 13 sacks last 2 years. Get every good MAC player, like legit good MAC player you can get and buy him. That's what Kurt Signetti did.
Mm-hmm.
Is he didn't go get a bunch of guys from Notre Dame, and I mean he did this offseason, but like who did he get? A gritty, hard-nosed, tough captain caliber player in Pat Coogan. But like he went and got a bunch of kids from Old Dominion, James Madison, like schools like that. And they were kids with a chip on their shoulder. Right.
Kids he was familiar with.
Right. Played with and played against.
Yeah.
Or coached with and coached against.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what Purdue needs to do for these next couple of years is find some of those high-level kids at that level and then try to get some Power 5 cast off that has some talent that people are giving up on or got in trouble or whatever and hope that you can get that corrected and take a chance on a kid. But like that's what they're going to need to do. And honestly, Vince, he needs to start – they need to be one to don't just go portal only. Recruit the high schools in Indiana. Recruit some of those good players. Recruit some of those good players in Illinois. Do that, and I think he can turn it around to some degree. How much of a turnaround can he do? I don't know how much faith I have in Barry Odom to get them to Joe Tiller level. I don't know that he's ever shown me he can be that, but I know that they'll play hard and they'll compete. And if he can recruit, then Purdue can become competitive again.
Right.
Jeff Brom good. Maybe not, but a team where you're like, you better bring it. You better bring your lunch pail against this team. That's what I think he can build at Purdue.
That's our opponent preview there for the Purdue Boilermakers, which is team number 3 on Notre Dame's schedule moving forward. We got a super chat here.
Thank you, Remington.
From Remington Jeans.
Yep. I've met Remington before at the Ace Hardware here, met him and his son, and then also met someone that works with Remington, Robert. So Robert, thank you, man. Saw you in the grocery store yesterday. Appreciate you stopping me, man. And really appreciate you guys watching and listening to the show. And
100%.
Very, very much so.
Yes, I frequent that hardware store quite often.
Yeah.
So very, very.
And
good.
Remington runs a company that does some concrete stuff. So I'm going to talk to him about that. So if you're a local person looking for that, give Remington Jeans give him a shout.
Yeah.
So he's been on the show for a while. So appreciate you very much, man.
Need some driveway level.
I do, man. I got some major issues.
I'm saying I do. Yeah, but yeah.
I got some major issues with our driveway because we have. I think there's a bunch of ant tunnels underneath, and it's starting to.
That's it. Yeah, I get it. I'm right there. So, but anyway, like I said, that's going to do it for our Purdue preview. We will be moving on to Notre Dame's 4th opponent which is Arkansas in our next opponent preview. So stay tuned for that. But we will be back.
Yeah.
IB Nation's. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I say we got a fun week this week.
Oh,
so obviously IB Nation Sports Talk tonight, but buy, sell, hold tomorrow. But Thursday, we're going to be talking about DNs.
Yep.
And then we're going to rank our top 10 quarterbacks in college football. We're also going to have some sleeper picks. It's going to be fun because this week also starts sort of our national preview of different things as well. So I'm very
lot going on. There's a lot going on over the next few weeks. Well, all summer really, but make sure you guys stay locked in.
A lot of recruiting news too.
Yeah, but that's over on the boards.
People are starting to come around to what I've been reporting for days, but it's good to know that they're coming around on it.
They probably got a subscription to
they need
boards.irishbreakdown.com.
They need one.
I'm just saying.
We know one guy for sure comes on our site and has a tendency to report things like 30 minutes after I put something up, but we don't need to go there. He doesn't cover Notre Dame anymore. So, yeah.
Sorry. Hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate you very much. Again, in about 20 minutes, IB Nation Sports Talk will kick off for tonight's show. Got some good stuff coming at you there. Then obviously make sure you give us a like or a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your family and friends, all of the, help us out. We really appreciate it. Boards.irishbreakdown.com is where you can find all the intel from the recruiting weekend. And then also there's some breakdown things over there. So you want to check that out. But only boards.irishbreakdown.com. Best money you can spend with all the intel. Because we're not going to spill it all in the shows. That's the thing. You've got to get over to the boards, the premium message boards, if you want to get that intel. So make sure you check that out. And then, of course, irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of written content over there by Bryan and Trevor and a couple of other contributors.
Sean Davis had a really good, really important comments that was on the board today only from the head coach for Carr Adams.
Okay.
And he talked to Carr also. So that's on the board today as well.
I'm telling you, that's where you need to be. Boards.irishbreakdown.com. We can't tell you enough. That is where all the intel is. So everybody, for Trevor, for Bryan, I'm Vince. We appreciate you hanging out with us. We will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.